Greetings, dear subscribers and casual listeners of my channel. Every year, millions of people re-watch the Harry Potter films, knowing them almost by heart. Yet it's surprising how many of them have never held the books in their hands. The very books the films are based on. The movies are brilliant, no doubt about that. But with only 2 hours of screen time per film, it's impossible to fit in all the rich storylines, nuances and explanations the books provide. As a result, some important details are left behind the scenes, and without the book context, the average viewer might not understand why certain characters act the way they do. Let's explore some of the most interesting examples, and you'll see for yourself just how much you might have missed. Enjoy watching. Number 1. The Prophecy, Order of the Phoenix. The film Order of the Phoenix touches on the prophecy, a mysterious orb in the Department of Mysteries that Voldemort is so eager to obtain. But why? Why this whole battle at the Ministry? The book tells us more. It reveals that the prophecy states one must die at the hand of the other. And crucially, Voldemort chose Harry as his equal and marked him, thereby fulfilling the prophecy. Even more, that choice led to Harry unintentionally becoming a Horcrux. This isn't just symbolic, it's a pivotal twist in the whole story. And the movie barely mentions it. Number 2. Priori, incantatem, Goblet of Fire. At the climax of Goblet of Fire, Harry and Voldemort's wands clash, and something strange happens. Golden beams, eerie sounds, ghostly figures. Dumbledore casually refers to it as the Priori incantatem effect, but what does that mean? The book goes into far more depth. Priori incantatem is a rare magical phenomenon that occurs when two wands sharing the same magical core, in this case a phoenix feather, are forced to duel. They create a magical echo, revealing the last spells cast, in reverse order. That's why Harry sees Cedric, Frank Bryce, and even his own parents. The scene becomes infinitely more tragic and meaningful with the full context. Number 3. Barty Crouch Jr.'s escape, Goblet of Fire. If you've only seen the film, you were probably confused about who Barty Crouch Jr. is or how he suddenly became such an important Death Eater. How did he escape Azkaban in the first place? The book explains it in detail. His dying mother secretly switched places with him using Polyjuice Potion. Barty returned home under strict control by his father, kept in line with the Imperious Curse, and watched by the house elf Winky. But when Bertha Jorkins visited their home, the secret unraveled. Though Crouch Sr. altered her memory, Voldemort eventually extracted the truth, hunted down the Crouch family, and turned the tables. The father was placed under the Imperious Curse, while the son became a loyal servant. This dark and complex subplot is almost entirely omitted from the movie. Number 4. Peter Pettigrew's betrayal, Prisoner of Azkaban. The Prisoner of Azkaban is a fan-favorite film, but it's also where the first major book-to-film discrepancies begin. In the movie, we're told Peter Pettigrew betrayed the Potters and framed Sirius Black, but the details are sparse. In the book, this is one of the most emotionally intense and psychologically rich plots. James Potter, suspecting a traitor in the Order of the Phoenix, secretly changed his secret keeper to Pettigrew, hoping to mislead Voldemort. Tragically, no one guessed that Peter was the spy. Sirius learned the truth too late and ended up in Azkaban. The film glosses over the tragedy that haunts this entire story arc. Number 5. Lucius Malfoy's agenda, Chamber of Secrets. In Chamber of Secrets, we see Lucius Malfoy slip Tom Riddle's diary into Ginny's cauldron. But why? Out of pure malice? The book paints a clearer picture. Arthur Weasley had been investigating Lucius for possessing dark artifacts. Lucius retaliated, planting the cursed diary on Ginny in hopes that chaos would follow and Arthur would take the blame, possibly losing his job. It was a cold political move, calculated and cruel. Lucius was willing to endanger a child for the sake of his own status. The films portray him as a pompous aristocrat, but the book reveals a much more dangerous and manipulative figure. Number 6. Why Snape joined the Death Eaters, Half-Blood Prince. In the films, Snape's past feels like a mystery with missing pages. We know he was a Death Eater, we know he switched sides, but why? The books take us back to his youth, a lonely boy from Spinner's End, obsessed with the dark arts, drawn to powerful, dangerous friends at Hogwarts, names like Mulciber and Avery. Even when Lily Evans, his only friend, warns him about their cruelty, he doesn't listen. "You're being stupid," she says. "They're Death Eaters in training." Still, Snape drifts closer to darkness, and one day, in a moment of anger and shame, he calls her mudblood. That single word ends everything. After that, Snape throws himself deeper into Voldemort's world, not because he believes in it, but because he's lost the only thing that made him human. When he realizes Voldemort intends to kill Lily, it shatters him. He begs Dumbledore to protect her. "You disgust me," Dumbledore tells him, when Snape asks only for Lily's life, not her family's. But Snape's regret is real. From that point on, his life becomes a quiet, painful act of redemption. The films show his love, they show his bravery, but they skip the beginning, the fall, that makes his rise so powerful. Number 7, Kreacher and the Locket, Order of the Phoenix. Kreacher is barely more than a grumbling background character in the films, but in the book, Order of the Phoenix, he plays a critical role in the fall of Sirius Black. Kreacher despises Sirius, who treats him with open contempt. To Kreacher, the true mistress of the house is Bellatrix Lestrange. So when Harry tries to reach Sirius through the Floo network and Kreacher lies, "Master Sirius is not here. He has gone." The trap is set. Harry believes Sirius is being tortured at the Ministry. He rushes in, the prophecy is lost, and Sirius dies. All because of a single lie born from bitterness. "Kreacher is what he has been made by wizards," Dumbledore says later. Yes, Sirius treated him like vermin, but he was not vermin. And there's more. In Deathly Hallows, the Locket Horcrux, the one Harry and his friends search for, was once in the house the whole time. Regulus Black, Sirius's brother, had learned the truth about Voldemort's Horcruxes. He ordered Kreacher to help retrieve the original locket from the cave, and Kreacher obeyed. After Regulus's death, Kreacher hid the locket in Grimmauld Place. It was stolen later by Mundungus Fletcher. The film skips this entirely. But in the book, when Harry shows Kreacher kindness, something changes. The elf returns to them. Not out of duty, but out of loyalty. And in the kitchen of number 12, Kreacher leads the house elves into battle, shouting, "Fight for my master, defender of house elves." He goes from traitor to warrior, but only in the pages of the book. Number 8, Percy Weasley's family, conflict, Order of the Phoenix. In the films, Percy Weasley is little more than a background character, but in the books he causes one of the deepest rifts in the Weasley family. When the Ministry refuses to believe Voldemort has returned, Percy sides with them, not with Dumbledore, not with Harry, and not with his own parents. He moves out, sends back his Christmas jumper, doesn't speak to his father. He's always been ambitious, Molly says, trying to hold back tears. It's not just a political stance, it's betrayal, one that leaves the family torn and silent. But Percy returns. In the final book, as the Battle of Hogwarts begins, he comes running through the door, red-faced and breathless. "I was a fool!" he shouts. "A pompous, self-important fool." He stands beside Fred, laughing and dueling, as if trying to make up for every missed moment. And then Fred dies. The reconciliation, so fresh and fragile, ends in heartbreak. That's what the films miss. Not just Percy's absence, but the weight of his return. In the books, it's a reminder that families break, but they can heal. Sometimes too late, but not always. Number 9, Dumbledore's family tragedy, Deathly Hallows. Dumbledore is always calm in the films, wise, untouchable. But the book shows something else, a man haunted by a single moment that changed everything. Ariana Dumbledore, his little sister, had magic she couldn't control. After being attacked by muggles, her power turned inward. Their father went to Azkaban defending her. Their mother later died in an accident caused by Ariana herself. Left alone with his brother Aberforth and a grieving child, Albus met Gellert Grindelwald, brilliant, ambitious, dangerous. Together they dreamed of ruling the world for the greater good. But Aberforth refused to let Ariana become a pawn in their plans. The argument turned to a duel. Wands flashed, spells flew, and Ariana was caught in the middle. "She was there," Aberforth says in the book, his voice shaking, "and she couldn't control it, and she died." No one knows whose curse hit her. Dumbledore never forgave himself. That's why he turned down power. That's why he feared his own ambition. He didn't just lose a sister, he killed a part of himself that day. The film brushes past it, a few vague words, a sad glance, but in the book, Dumbledore confesses everything to Harry at King's Cross. "I was gifted," he says. "I was clever, I was brilliant, and I wanted it all." The man who once dreamed of control ended up building a life around restraint. His silence, his caution, his mysterious detachment, it all stems from that summer and a girl named Ariana who never got to grow up. Number 10, why Harry survived the killing curse, Deathly Hallows. In the forest, Harry stands before Voldemort and does not raise his wand. He closes his eyes. He is ready to die. The green flash hits him, and everything goes silent. But then he wakes up, alone, lying in a place Dumbledore later calls King's Cross. "You were the 7th Horcrux, Harry," Dumbledore tells him. That's the key the films barely touch. Voldemort didn't just strike Harry, he struck a fragment of his own soul, the piece that latched on to Harry the night he tried to kill him as a baby. That piece, that shard of Voldemort's soul, is what died in the forest. And it could die because Harry chose it. He let himself be hit. He didn't fight back. It was sacrifice, not strength, that saved him. By walking into the forest willingly, he was saving others. That kind of magic is ancient, Dumbledore says. Voldemort, for all his power, never understood that. He aimed to destroy a body, but ended up destroying himself. And there was one more reason Harry came back. Voldemort had used Harry's blood to resurrect himself. That blood, carrying Lily's protection, now lived in both of them. It bound Harry to life as long as Voldemort lived. "He tethered you to life while he lives," Dumbledore says. Voldemort, in trying to make himself immortal, made Harry unkillable by his own hand. That irony is pure Rowling, and it never makes it fully to the screen. Number 11, Neville's parents and his true courage. Goblet of Fire and Order of the Phoenix. Neville Longbottom was never meant to be a hero. At least, that's what everyone thought. In the films, he's shy, clumsy, a background figure, until the final battle. But in the books, Neville carries a secret weight that changes everything. His parents, Frank and Alice Longbottom, were celebrated Aurors, brave, loyal, members of the original Order of the Phoenix. And then Bellatrix Lestrange came. She tortured them with the Cruciatus curse until their minds broke. They didn't die. That might have been kinder. They lived on in St. Mungo's hospital, vacant, confused, unable to recognize their son. In Order of the Phoenix, Harry and his friends stumble upon them during a Christmas visit. Neville is there, quiet, holding a gum wrapper his mother gives him, the only thing she can offer. "She must like you very much," says the healer gently. Neville pockets the wrapper without a word. It's a scene the film chose not to show, but in the book, it breaks your heart. That's the burden Neville carries, every mistake he makes at Hogwarts, every trembling wand, every awkward silence. It all comes from a place of grief and pressure. He knows what his parents were, what they sacrificed, and he wonders why he isn't like them. He's proud of them, says his grandmother, but he thinks they would be ashamed of him. The boy who could have been the chosen one lives in the shadow of what might have been. And yet, in the end, he stands. In the Battle of Hogwarts, Neville doesn't just fight. He draws the sword of Gryffindor from the Sorting Hat. He decapitates Nagini, the final Horcrux. He becomes the spark that ends Voldemort's immortality. The shy boy with trembling hands becomes a warrior, and when he does, it's not just for Harry, it's for Frank and Alice, for the parents who can't remember him, but who would have been so proud. Number 12. The Deathly Hallows as a moral test. Deathly Hallows. The Deathly Hallows are introduced in the film as little more than magical relics from a fairy tale. 3 brothers, a clever trick, and a deal with death. That's all most viewers remember. Yes, they learn that these are powerful objects, the Elder Wand, the Resurrection Stone, and the Invisibility Cloak. But what the films miss entirely is what these objects mean. In the books, the Hallows are not just tools, they are symbols, each tied to a different way people confront death. Lord Voldemort wants to conquer death. He seeks the Elder Wand, the most powerful wand ever made. He believes that with it, no one can defeat him. "There is no good and evil, there is only power," he once told Harry. That belief drives his every decision. The wand becomes an obsession. But Voldemort never understands that mastering death is not about overpowering it, it's about accepting it, and that is why the wand never truly obeys him. Severus Snape, on the other hand, carries a different burden. His longing is not for power, but for lost love. He once loved Lily Potter. After her death, he's drawn to the Resurrection Stone, hidden inside the cursed ring that once belonged to Marvolo Gaunt. It's not a casual interest. He wears that ring knowing it's dangerous. In the book, Dumbledore tells Harry, "You are the true master of death because the true master does not seek to run away from death." Snape, like Voldemort, cannot let go of what has already passed. His need to bring Lily back blinds him. Harry makes the only real choice. He doesn't chase the wand, he doesn't use the stone, and he never needs the cloak to hide from death. Instead, he walks into the Forbidden Forest alone, ready to die. He holds the stone only to see his parents, Sirius and Remus, to say goodbye. He drops it before the final step. That act, not battle or spellwork, is what makes Harry the true master of the Hallows. He doesn't try to beat death. He meets it willingly, just like the third brother in the tale. Number 13. Why Harry named his son after Snape, Deathly Hallows. When Harry Potter stands on platform 9 3/4 in the epilogue, 19 years after the Battle of Hogwarts, he does something that sends a ripple through every reader's heart. He gently tells his son, "Albus Severus, you were named for 2 headmasters of Hogwarts. One of them was a Slytherin, and he was probably the bravest man I ever knew." In the film, this moment is brief, poignant, yes, but lacking the deep emotional weight carried in the books. Without the inner revelations from Harry's journey, the true meaning behind the name is lost to many. To understand why Harry named his son Albus Severus is to understand the transformation of Harry himself and the profound shift in his understanding of love, sacrifice, and forgiveness. Severus Snape was never the man Harry thought he was. For years, Harry saw Snape as cruel, biased, and relentlessly unfair. He watched Snape torment students, insult Hermione's appearance, and openly favor Slytherins over all others. To Harry, who had grown up with neglect and abuse, Snape seemed like just another adult who wielded power without compassion. Yet when Harry walks into the Pensieve in the final moments of Snape's life, everything he thought he knew shatters. The memory begins in a childhood bedroom. Lily Evans, young and radiant, laughs beside a boy with sallow skin and hungry eyes. This boy, Severus, shows her magic before she even sets foot in Hogwarts. From the very beginning, Snape loved Lily with a quiet, burning intensity. It is not a romantic tale, it is a tragedy, because Severus, in his insecurity and his hunger for belonging, makes a choice that haunts him forever. He joins the Death Eaters and in doing so betrays the very person he loved most. When he learns that Voldemort plans to kill Lily and her family, he begs Dumbledore to save them, but it is too late. She dies, and from that moment, Snape becomes something else, something broken and vengeful and forever changed. What stuns Harry most is the longevity of Snape's remorse. "After all this time?" Dumbledore asks in the memory. "Always," Snape replies. That single word, laden with grief and loyalty, echoes like a curse. Snape does not seek redemption in the public eye. He does not ask for Harry's forgiveness. He endures, he protects, he spies on Voldemort at great personal risk. He walks a razor's edge between two worlds, loathed by both, and through it all he shields Harry, not because he loves the boy, but because Harry is Lily's son. It is not a simple or noble motive. It is deeply flawed and deeply human. Harry, who had spent so long viewing the world in black and white, is forced to see the greys. In Snape, he sees a man who did terrible things for love and then spent the rest of his life trying to atone. He sees that Snape's bravery was not born of light, but of darkness wrestled into obedience. This kind of courage is different from the kind Harry saw in Sirius or Dumbledore. It is the courage of persistence, of bearing unbearable pain without ever seeking comfort. Harry, whose own life was shaped by sacrifice, recognizes the immensity of Snape's. The naming of Albus Severus is not only a tribute, it is an act of forgiveness. It is Harry's way of saying that he no longer sees Snape as just a tormentor, but as a protector. It is an acknowledgement that even the most flawed people can be heroes, and more than that, it is an offering of peace. Throughout the series, names carry weight. Harry names his children not after glory, but after the lessons carved into him by the people who shaped his soul. Albus Dumbledore, too, was not a flawless man. Harry learned this in the Deathly Hallows, when Dumbledore's past emerges in fragments and shadows. The man who had once seemed infallible had once dreamed of domination with Grindelwald, and allowed himself to be seduced by the idea of power. He let his sister, Ariana, suffer. He made choices that cost lives, and yet he also changed. He carried guilt, bore the weight of his past, and worked to make the world better. Harry's love for Dumbledore is complicated, but it endures. In naming his son Albus Severus, Harry binds together two men who taught him that greatness is not born of perfection, but of struggle and remorse. There is also the element of courage in the name. Gryffindor courage is loud and visible. It rushes into battle. It stands on principle. But the courage of Snape is quiet. It hides behind sarcasm and bitter sneers. It bleeds in silence. It is the kind of courage that protects even when no one will ever know. Naming a child after Snape is a declaration that this kind of bravery matters. It is not the type found in stories or celebrated in Quidditch cups. It is the kind that wins wars in the shadows. Harry's relationship with Slytherin House is transformed through this act. For years, he associated Slytherin with cruelty and elitism. Draco Malfoy and his gang embodied everything Harry stood against. Even the Sorting Hat had tried to place Harry in Slytherin, and he had resisted it with everything he had. But the truth, as Dumbledore once told him, is that it is our choices, Harry, that show what we truly are. By naming his son after a Slytherin, Harry is extending a hand across the aisle. He is breaking the chain of prejudice. He is teaching his children that bravery and goodness are not confined to one house. In the books, Ginny supports Harry's choice without protest. She, too, understands what this name means. By the time of the epilogue, the wizarding world has changed, but not entirely. Prejudice still lingers. Scars run deep. For Harry to give his child the name of Severus Snape is to make a public statement that redemption is real and that the war was fought not only by saints but by sinners who chose the right side in the end. Number 14, the Ministry Battle, what the film left out, Order of the Phoenix. It begins with a trap. Harry, consumed by visions of Sirius in mortal danger, rushes to the Ministry of Magic with Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Neville, and Luna. The prophecy in the Department of Mysteries is their destination. But the real scene of this ambush is the missing heart of the fifth Harry Potter film. What we get in the movie is a condensed, simplified vision, a dramatic duel or two, a few collapsing shelves, a whirlwind of flying spells. Yet what the book offers is a haunting labyrinth of magical enigmas and teenage courage tested beyond reason. What unfolds in the pages is not just a battle, it's a rite of passage bathed in fear, pain, and magic so ancient it seems to breathe. When the group enters the Department of Mysteries in the book, they don't just burst into a single room. They move through doors that spin, disorienting even Hermione. They pass through a room filled with floating brains, another where time is manipulated in glass orbs, and a room devoted to love that remains sealed. These mysterious places are not window dressing. They reflect the themes that dominate the series: love, time, thought, death, and destiny. Each chamber is more than physical space. It's a metaphor, a test, a threat. The film abandons these rooms entirely. turning the whole sequence into a linear confrontation. The prophecy room is not just a corridor with shelves in the book. It is a cathedral of glass spheres, each containing whispered secrets. The fact that Harry can pick up the prophecy orb because it concerns him is a revelation. It reminds us of the personal burden he bears. But what follows in the book is chaos and ambush by Death Eaters led by Lucius Malfoy. Unlike the film's brief skirmish, the book delivers a drawn-out sequence where fear and courage coil tightly together. Each of the 6 teenagers, barely more than children, are forced to fight wizards trained in cruelty. Ginny is the first to demonstrate unexpected power. As they flee from the Death Eaters, she shatters the floor of the brain room with a blasting curse, creating a dangerous chasm. This moment is crucial. Ginny, often sidelined in early books, is no longer the girl from the Chamber of Secrets. She's a force now, bold, unyielding, precise with her wand. It's an early glimpse of the woman who will stand against Voldemort's army at Hogwarts years later. Then there's Ron, who suffers one of the strangest attacks. He's caught by a brain, yes, a brain, that wraps its tentacles around him in a grotesque fusion of thought and punishment. The movie cuts this entirely, yet the image of Ron laughing maniacally, then screaming as the brain invades his mind, is terrifying. It's a reminder that in this battle, the weapons are not only wands and curses, but fear and madness. Hermione is struck down by a curse that silences her. She slumps, blood staining her robes. Harry believes she might be dead. In that moment, something in him shatters. The leader of the group, the one who always has the answers, is lying helpless and unconscious. This moment is left vague in the film, her injury reduced to a stumble. But in the book, it's a critical turning point. Harry's desperation becomes real, raw. Neville Longbottom, perhaps the most underappreciated hero in the series, rises here. After his nose is broken and his wand shattered, he still fights. With blood streaming down his face, barely able to speak through the damage, Neville casts spells with someone else's wand. "He's still trying to talk to me," Harry observes in the book, trying to warn me, but his mouth is bleeding badly and the words are garbled. This is not comic relief. This is a boy who has lived through silence and fear and is now standing against the people who tortured his parents into madness. The Death Eaters are not faceless goons here. Bellatrix Lestrange, with her mad laughter and elegant cruelty, taunts them. Dolohov, the one who injured Hermione, is ruthless. Lucius Malfoy moves like a general commanding the others. These villains are not background noise, they are predators, and their violence is intimate. They enjoy the fear. This detail is lost on screen, where the Death Eaters are reduced to swirling shapes in black robes and masks. Then comes the shattering moment, the arrival of the Order of the Phoenix. Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, Tonks, Kingsley Shacklebolt, and Mad-Eye Moody appear. They don't come with triumphant music, they come with fire in their eyes because their children are bleeding. They fight with desperation and rage. The duel between Sirius and Bellatrix is fast, brutal. Sirius is grinning as he fights, barking spells with defiance. "Come on, you can do better than that," he cries. And then she strikes him, a jet of light, a brief look of surprise. He falls through the veiled archway. The veil, not a prop, not a door, a place of death. The archway in the Department of Mysteries is described as ancient, whispering with voices only Luna and Harry seem to hear. Its magic is old, unexplainable. When Sirius falls through, he doesn't scream, he's just gone. This is death in the wizarding world, not dramatized, not heroic, just silence. The movie makes it quick, the book makes it cruel. For Harry, this is not just loss, it's guilt and rage and helplessness tangled together. And then Voldemort appears. In the book, this moment is apocalyptic. The temperature drops, the walls seem to warp. Harry freezes, wand useless. Voldemort is fury incarnate, no longer hiding, no longer using proxies. He wants the prophecy. And then Dumbledore is there, not as a kindly headmaster, but as a titan. What follows is not just a duel, it is magic as myth, wizardry elevated to poetry and destruction. Number 15. Why Dumbledore Feared Love, Half-Blood Prince, and Deathly Hallows. In the world of wizardry, power often comes with shadows, and for Albus Dumbledore, the man who orchestrated great battles, held secrets deeper than the Department of Mysteries, and carried burdens even death could not erase, his greatest shadow was not dark magic, but something far more human: love. Long before the fall of Voldemort or the discovery of Horcruxes, long before Dumbledore became a revered headmaster with twinkling eyes and cryptic wisdom, he was simply a young man with brilliance in his blood and fire in his heart. The summer he met Gellert Grindelwald changed everything. It was in Godric's Hollow, in the quiet home he shared with his troubled siblings, that he first encountered the boy who mirrored his own intellect and ambition. Grindelwald was dangerous, dazzling, and seductive, not merely in the charm of his ideas, but in how closely they resonated with Dumbledore's own unspoken desires. The books do not shy away from this truth. In Deathly Hallows, when Elphias Doge and Bathilda Bagshot recount Dumbledore's youth, we find fragments of the real Albus, the one not yet tempered by tragedy. Brilliant, dazzlingly clever, Doge says, but he speaks also of how quickly Dumbledore was drawn to Grindelwald. They spoke of the greater good, a doctrine that sounded noble but hinted at tyranny. Dumbledore in those days allowed himself to be consumed by possibility and emotion. His love for Grindelwald was never physically defined, but it was emotionally absolute. That summer ended in fire and ruin. A duel broke out between Albus, Aberforth, and Grindelwald, a fight that ended with the death of Ariana Dumbledore, their younger sister. Her accidental death was the result of uncontrolled magic, confusion, and fury. But more than that, it was the moment Albus began to fear the parts of himself that could love so deeply, so blindly, that they endangered the world. From that point on, Dumbledore distanced himself from both love and leadership. Though he had the intelligence and political support to become Minister for Magic, he refused. "I had proven as a very young man," he told Harry in Deathly Hallows, "that power was my weakness and my temptation." He did not trust himself to wield authority without falling again into the seduction of his own ambitions. His heart had once opened to Grindelwald, and in doing so had opened the door to destruction. He could not risk that happening again. Dumbledore's fear of love was not coldness, it was restraint. He kept those he cared for at arm's length, cloaking his affection in riddles and responsibilities. With Harry he was warm but distant, guiding but withholding. The boy who lived became his greatest weapon, yet he never told him the full truth until the very end. Not because he didn't care, but because he cared too much. Dumbledore once confessed, "I cared more for your happiness than your knowing the truth." That was the essence of his fear, that love would cloud his judgment, that it would make him weak, that it would again tempt him to control the world for someone else's sake. In Half-Blood Prince, this fear reaches its crescendo. Dumbledore and Harry stand on the precipice of the cave, hunting for Voldemort's Horcrux. Before they even enter, Dumbledore tells Harry, "I am not worried, Harry, I am with you." But the events that follow prove otherwise. When forced to drink the cursed potion guarding the fake locket, Dumbledore is reduced to a man in agony, screaming for it to stop, begging to be killed. "Don't hurt them. Please, kill me instead," he cries. The hallucination reveals not just physical torment, but a collapse of emotional defenses. He is not reliving battles or lectures or spells. He is reliving guilt. He is reliving Ariana. And yet, it is in his final year alive while training Harry that Dumbledore makes his most dangerous gamble. He begins to hope again. But his hope is cautious, riddled with shame. He gives Harry the sword of Gryffindor, knowing it might lead to his own death. He plans his own demise with Snape, carefully orchestrating the moment so that Draco will not become a murderer. But more than strategy, it's atonement. Dumbledore knows that if he allows himself to love without boundaries, even for a moment, he might endanger them all. "Do not pity the dead, Harry, pity the living, and above all, those who live without love," he later tells Harry's spirit. Yet he, the man who said those words, had chosen to live without it. In his youth, Dumbledore's love had made him reckless. In his old age, it made him hesitant. He feared the intoxicating pull of devotion, the loss of rationality that came with it. Grindelwald was not just a dark wizard to him. He was the embodiment of temptation, a mirror to everything Dumbledore could have been. It is no accident that he delayed facing Grindelwald for decades. "I was afraid," he admits plainly, "afraid I would do what he asked and beg forgiveness afterward." That one line unravels the myth of the all-powerful wizard. Dumbledore was not afraid of losing, he was afraid of giving in. The Dumbledore of the films never fully carries this weight. He is portrayed as stately, a sage. His tragedy is subtle, his past hinted at rather than confronted. But the Dumbledore of the books is raw. He is a man who saw what love could do to him and chose to bury it under centuries of control. Even when he gave Harry to the Dursleys, it wasn't cruelty, it was an attempt to avoid attachment. To let Harry grow up without becoming another Ariana, another weakness he would die to protect. Number 16. Hermione erasing her parents' memories. Deathly Hallows. The morning sun poured softly into the Granger household, but it illuminated a living room stripped bare of memories. No smiling photos adorned the walls. No framed degrees celebrated the academic achievements of two proud dentists. No trace remained of a daughter named Hermione. Somewhere in Australia, two people now called Wendell and Monica Wilkins believed they had always lived a quiet life. They had no idea they once had a brilliant daughter who had cried herself to sleep the night she rewrote their past. The film Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. Part 1 offered a mere glimpse of this sacrifice. A teenage girl lifting her wand, uttering a spell, and vanishing from her parents' memories. The moment passed quickly, almost quietly, accompanied only by a haunting fade from family photographs. But the book paints a different picture, one of heartbreak, desperation, and the devastating weight of choice. This was not merely a magical precaution, it was the most painful act of love Hermione Granger had ever performed. In the pages of the novel, we understand that Hermione did not simply erase herself. She rewrote the very structure of her parents' lives. "I've also modified my parents' memories so that they're convinced they're really called Wendell and Monica Wilkins, and that their life's ambition is to move to Australia," she tells Harry and Ron with a trembling kind of pride. But the bravery in her voice masks the cost of that decision. Hermione was sending them away from a war they didn't even know existed, from an enemy who wouldn't hesitate to torture them for information they didn't have. She did it not just to protect them, but to protect herself from being manipulated through them. This was not a spur-of-the-moment charm. Hermione would have spent days perfecting the enchantment. Memory charms are notoriously delicate. A mistake could cause irreparable damage. She was not just risking her relationship with her parents, she was risking their sanity, their very sense of self. And yet she did it because she understood the stakes. Voldemort had already murdered entire families, tortured Muggleborns and their loved ones, and used people's vulnerabilities against them. To leave her parents as they were would have been to hand them over like pawns on a board he controlled. Hermione was always the planner, the strategist, the one who prepared for war long before the others realized it had begun. In choosing to erase herself from her parents' lives, she was acting not out of coldness, but out of a desperate will to protect. Yet this act cost her more than anyone saw. The Grangers were the only family she had. She'd grown up in a Muggle world, far from the turmoil of wizarding politics. Her mother had brushed her curls and taken her to the dentist's office after school. Her father had taught her how to ride a bike and fix a wobbly chair. These memories were all she had, and now she would carry them alone. When Hermione cast the spell, she didn't just alter memory, she severed a bond. She stripped herself of the ability to write home, to hear comforting words, to feel the tether that binds children to their parents. Every birthday that passed, Every sleepless night in a tent with Harry and Ron, she endured with the knowledge that somewhere her parents lived a life where she didn't exist. The silence of that absence must have been louder than any scream. In creating Wendell and Monica Wilkins, Hermione did not just change names, she rewrote identities. These were people who had dedicated their lives to their child's education and success. She stripped them of that purpose. She gave them new dreams, new goals. She rewired their love into something else, all to shield them from a war they could never understand. That is the tragedy the film cannot convey. A few seconds of visual loss cannot compete with the horror of knowing you made your parents forget they ever loved you. And yet, Hermione never wavered. She never asked for pity. She did not tell Harry or Ron about her plan until long after it had been done. She knew they wouldn't understand, not fully. It was not just the act of casting the spell that was difficult, but the resolve to live with the consequences. She carried that grief like armor, protecting her from the chaos that followed. It became one more sacrifice in a war full of them. What makes this moment even more heartbreaking is that she didn't know if she would survive the fight against Voldemort. She had no guarantee that she'd be able to reverse the spell. In casting it, she accepted the very real possibility that her parents would live out the rest of their lives without ever remembering the daughter they had raised. That is not a security measure. That is the purest form of sacrifice. The spell itself, complex, risky, and deeply emotional, is not explored in the films. But the book gives us clues to its nature. Memory charms like Obliviate are dangerous even in skilled hands. When Gilderoy Lockhart's wand backfired, the result was permanent amnesia. Hermione, barely of age, had to apply a precision spell that wouldn't just erase but replace, substitute every photo, letter, and emotional echo with a fabricated story. One mistake and her parents could have been lost to madness, but she did it anyway. Throughout the book, Hermione remains composed, focused, and determined. But her pain leaks through in the quietest of moments. She hesitates when talking about family. She redirects conversations. The absence is too raw, too profound. While Ron complains about food and Harry dreams of his parents, Hermione silently endures the cost of her choice. It is only in hindsight that readers fully grasp the gravity of her decision. One might ask, why not hide them? Why not move them to a safe house? But Hermione knew better. The Death Eaters had eyes everywhere. The Ministry was compromised. People were tracked, watched, and interrogated. No place was safe, not for Muggles connected to the boy who lived. The only way to truly protect her parents was to sever all links, to vanish from their lives so completely that even she couldn't trace them back. And when the war was over, when Voldemort lay defeated and Hogwarts stood scarred but free, Hermione had to reverse the spell. That process, too, is not shown in the films. But imagine it, traveling across continents, locating people who no longer knew her name, and gently lifting the veil of forgetfulness she had placed, reintroducing herself, watching their faces shift from confusion to horror to awe. There is no spell for that reunion, no magic strong enough to undo the emotional scars. This scene, so brief in the film, echoes with far greater weight in the book. It reveals the core of Hermione's character, her capacity to act selflessly, to endure unbearable pain without complaint, to make decisions rooted in love rather than fear. It shows that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's a teenage girl standing in a living room, erasing herself from the only people who have ever truly loved her. It is worth noting that J.K. Rowling described this act as one of the most noble in the entire series. In interviews, she emphasized Hermione's maturity and strength. This was not just a side plot, it was a defining moment, one that proved Hermione's heart was as powerful as her intellect. For fans who only know the films, the moment can seem clinical, even sterile. But for readers, it's a scene etched in sorrow. It lingers, it hurts, and it elevates Hermione beyond the role of the clever one. She becomes a symbol of quiet heroism, of the kind of love that expects no reward. In the tapestry of sacrifices woven through the Deathly Hallows, this moment deserves a place of honor, because it was made without witness, without glory, and without promise of reunion. It was the act of a daughter who loved so deeply that she was willing to be forgotten, if only to keep her family safe. When we think of the heroes of the Second Wizarding War, we often remember Harry's bravery, Ron's loyalty, Neville's stand. But Hermione's sacrifice stands among the greatest precisely because it was so personal, so invisible, and so devastating. She didn't face death in that moment. She chose a living grief. And she carried it with grace. The books give us that insight. They allow us to feel her silence, to see the weight in her eyes when someone mentions family. They remind us that not all wounds are visible, not all heroes wear their pain on their sleeve. Some bury it for the sake of those they love. And that is why Hermione Granger, in that one quiet act of memory, proved she was not just the brightest witch of her age, but perhaps the bravest too. Number 17, Why Harry Never Used Avada Kedavra, all parts. Harry Potter knew how to kill. He had heard the words. He had watched their green light fly through the air more times than he could count. But from the moment he entered the wizarding world to the very end of the Battle of Hogwarts, he never once used Avada Kedavra, not even against Voldemort himself. This wasn't a matter of ignorance or inexperience. It was a choice, a deliberate, unwavering choice, one that defined the kind of wizard he had become. From the earliest stages of his journey at Hogwarts, Harry was exposed to dark magic. In his 4th year, he watched Cedric Diggory die at the hands of Voldemort. The killing curse had never looked more final, more absolute. A flash of green light and a rushing sound as though a vast, invisible something was soaring through the air. Instantly, Cedric was lying spread-eagled on the ground beside him. That moment was etched into Harry's mind forever. Death, quick and merciless, struck without resistance. It was the first time he truly understood what Avada Kedavra meant. It wasn't just a spell, it was an end. Harry never used the killing curse because he understood what it cost, not only to the victim but to the one who cast it. It demanded more than magical skill. It demanded hatred, real soul-splitting hatred, and Harry, even in the darkest of moments, never carried that kind of malice. He had anger, he had rage, but he did not have Voldemort's kind of hate. The books remind us again and again, love was Harry's greatest weapon, not violence. In The Half-Blood Prince, we see the difference spelled out clearly through another character, Draco Malfoy. Tasked with killing Dumbledore, Draco fails. He hesitates, not because he can't say the words, but because he can't cross that line. Harry, watching all of this unfold, understands. The killing curse is final, there is no coming back. Even when Harry tries using Cruciatus or Sectum Sempra, the spells feel foreign in his hands. They don't belong to him. He uses them only in moments of extreme stress and with immediate regret. Throughout the films, we see Harry in combat situations where Avada Kedavra could have been useful. He faces Bellatrix Lestrange after she kills Sirius. He's up against Fenrir Greyback, Lucius Malfoy, and Death Eaters who would murder without a second thought. But he never once speaks those forbidden words. Not when Dobby dies, not when Mad-Eye Moody is murdered, not even when Fred Weasley falls in battle. Others might have been tempted, Harry is not. Instead, he fights with disarming spells, shields, and defensive magic. His signature spell, Expelliarmus, is often mocked by those who believe it's too mild, but it becomes a symbol of his identity. During his duel with Voldemort, Harry doesn't rely on dark magic. He relies on what he knows, pushing back, protecting, refusing to become like the monster he's facing. "I won't blast people out of my way just because they're there," Harry says in Order of the Phoenix. That's Voldemort's job. In fact, one of the most telling moments comes in Deathly Hallows digs during the final confrontation. Voldemort casts Avada Kedavra, and Harry responds with Expelliarmus. It's poetic. The Dark Lord, with all his power, cannot defeat a boy who refuses to kill. And it's not luck that saves Harry, it's choice. The Elder Wand, recognizing that Harry is its true master, refuses to kill him. Voldemort is destroyed by his own spell. Harry wins not because he becomes stronger, but because he stays true to himself. This isn't a detail lost on readers. J.K. Rowling wrote Harry as a boy who walks the edge of darkness but never falls into it. In The Goblet of Fire, Barty Crouch Jr., disguised as Moody, says, "You need to mean them, Potter. You need to really want to cause pain, to enjoy it. Righteous anger won't do it." This is key. The unforgivable curses require an emotional cost. They're not simply mechanical, they're moral tests. Harry's moral compass is set in his very first year. In the Philosopher's Stone, when he confronts Quirrell, he's told, "There is no good and evil, there is only power and those too weak to seek it." Harry rejects this completely. Power without ethics to him is meaningless. He chooses to protect the stone, not for gain, but because it's right. That same sense of rightness follows him through all 7 books. When Sirius Black is believed to be a murderer, Harry doesn't lash out. He seeks understanding. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, once he learns the truth, he stops Lupin and Black from killing Peter Pettigrew. "I don't reckon my dad would have wanted his best friends to become killers," he says. This is Harry's guiding light. He knows that crossing the line once can change a person forever. He doesn't want that for himself. He doesn't want that for anyone he loves. The films, while more action-oriented, still reflect this principle. When Harry is given the opportunity to kill in the Department of Mysteries, he doesn't. When Bellatrix kills Sirius, his anger is raw, but still he can't bring himself to use dark magic. Instead, his screams echo through the hall, primal and full of grief. The spell that might have ended her never comes. In the Order of the Phoenix, when Harry confronts Voldemort inside the Ministry, he experiences possession. Voldemort tries to take over his body to fill him with hatred, but Harry resists, not through power, but through love. He thinks of his friends. He remembers what it means to care. That ultimately is what expels Voldemort, not a curse, not a weapon, but human connection. Harry's understanding of death also plays a role. From the Deathly Hallows, we learn that he doesn't fear it. He willingly walks into the Forbidden Forest to meet his fate, armed with only the Resurrection Stone and his courage. "Does it hurt?" he asks his parents' spirits. "Dying? Not at all," says Sirius. This exchange changes everything. Voldemort feared death above all else. Harry embraces it. And a man who does not fear death has no need for a killing curse. When he returns from the forest, reborn in a sense, Harry is clearer than ever. He doesn't kill Voldemort, he lets Voldemort kill himself. The Elder Wand chooses its master. Harry becomes that master not through conquest, but through restraint. His final act isn't an act of war, it's an act of closure. We also see this restraint mirrored in how he treats his enemies after the war. In the epilogue, we learn that Draco Malfoy survives, so do many Death Eaters. There are no revenge killings, no purges. Harry becomes an aura, yes, but one who reforms the system. He doesn't use his influence for vengeance. He uses it to rebuild. That's a hero's work. It would have been easy, cinematically tempting for Harry to hurl Avada Kedavra in the final battle. The green flash, the satisfying drama. But that's not who he is. The films, for all their action, stay true to that core. Even when surrounded by death and violence, Harry holds the line. He doesn't use the enemy's weapon. He defeats Voldemort not by matching his darkness, but by refusing it. When Voldemort dies, he dies alone. His body shatters, disintegrates, gone like dust. Harry stands over him, exhausted, but not broken. He hasn't killed, he has survived. He has chosen a harder path. In that moment, he becomes not just the boy who lived, but the man who endured. What sets Harry apart is not talent, nor lineage, nor luck. It is principle, a principle forged in loss and tested in battle. He could have become another Tom Riddle. He had the same orphanhood, the same pain, the same exposure to power, but he chose something else. He chose compassion. Even when he hated Snape, Harry never tried to harm him. Even when Umbridge tortured him, he never retaliated with cruelty. These aren't weaknesses, they are strengths. Strengths Voldemort could never understand. The ability to endure pain without passing it on. The courage to fight without destroying. That is true magic. In the end, Harry's refusal to use Avada Kedavra is not just a character trait, it is the essence of the story, a reminder that power must be tempered by conscience, that survival does not require savagery, that even in a world of dark magic there is room for mercy. So when the wand is passed to Harry, when he holds the most powerful object in the world, he snaps it in two. He throws away the temptation, he chooses a quiet life, a family, a future. The battle is over, and he has won, not by becoming the strongest, but by remaining the most human. Number 18. Voldemort's inability to understand love, Philosopher's Stone and Deathly Hallows. In the shadowy corridors beneath Hogwarts, where secrets whispered through stone and time, Tom Riddle once wandered alone. Long before he became Voldemort, before his name was feared and avoided, he was a boy who did not understand the simplest force in the wizarding world. He did not understand love, not because he resisted it, but because it was a language never spoken to him, a warmth never shown, a power dismissed before it could ever be known. This failure would not just shape his path, it would seal his doom. When Harry Potter survived the killing curse, the wizarding world saw it as a miracle, but for Voldemort it was an impossibility. He had crafted the curse with precision, with the full force of his will. He had murdered many before, even infants, and yet this child, this insignificant baby, had not died. Worse still, the curse had rebounded and nearly killed him. The only explanation offered, the one Dumbledore quietly gave, was love, Lily Potter's love. To Voldemort this was absurd. Love was a fiction of the weak. Power, ambition, and fear. These were the tools he valued. He had never known a mother's touch. Merop Gaunt, fragile and abused, had died moments after giving birth to him, having only wished for death after being abandoned by the muggle she had bewitched. Tom Riddle was born in a cold orphanage, unwanted by all, shaped by no one but himself. From the beginning, he was alone. And worse, he believed he needed no one. At Hogwarts, where love wove itself into friendships and rivalries alike, Tom remained detached. He learned charm, certainly. He seduced teachers, manipulated students, and deceived adults. But he never bonded. There is no good and evil, there is only power, and those too weak to seek it, he once said. And this was no mask. It was the creed of a soul that never felt affection. Even his followers, the Death Eaters, were never truly loved by him. They were tools, instruments of his will, names to be discarded when they failed. When Dumbledore discovered the nature of Harry's survival, he understood immediately that Voldemort would never grasp it. "He couldn't touch you," Dumbledore said in the Philosopher's Stone. "For this reason, your mother died to save you." If there is one thing Voldemort cannot understand, it is love. This wasn't a metaphor, it was a truth as hard and ancient as the stones of the castle. In the books, this truth echoes across every encounter between Harry and Voldemort. It is not merely a shield, it is the core of the series' moral axis. Voldemort's failure to understand love is most clearly illustrated in his obsession with immortality. To him, death was the ultimate defeat. He feared it not because he cherished life, but because he could not imagine surrender. He sought Horcruxes, tore his soul, shattered his very humanity to escape what he saw as a predator, lurking at the edge of existence. But in doing so, he lost the one thing that makes life worth protecting. Love binds souls. In his attempt to preserve his own, he destroyed its capacity to connect. One of the most powerful scenes in Deathly Hallows is not a duel, but a revelation. In the pensieve, Harry sees Snape's memories. He sees Lily, her kindness, her laughter, the way her presence lit the world for those around her. And he sees Snape, broken and bitter, clinging to her memory with a love that survived death. This love is not romanticized. It is painful, raw, and unfulfilled, but it is love, nonetheless. And it becomes the redemption of a man who had once walked with Death Eaters. After all this time, Dumbledore asks. Always, Snape answers. This single word, always, contains more power than any curse Voldemort ever cast. It is the magic he never understood. For Voldemort, loyalty was something bought with fear. Devotion was conditional. His followers bowed not from love, but from terror. Even Bellatrix, who adored him, was infatuated by power, not affection. She died believing in his supremacy, but not knowing, not really understanding, what it was she worshipped. When Voldemort killed Lily, he believed she was no threat. She had no wand raised, she offered no violence, she pleaded, she begged, and then she stood between him and Harry. That act, with the unarmed sacrifice of a mother, created an ancient magic, one Dumbledore later described as the strongest shield I know. It was not sentimentalism, it was old magic, older than spells or runes, born of choice and blood. Voldemort, in his arrogance, overlooked it. He didn't know that in that moment he was sealing his fate. Throughout the series, Voldemort mocks love as weakness. In Order of the Phoenix, during the climactic battle at the Ministry, he possesses Harry. He pours into his mind, attempting to crush him with despair. But it is Harry's memory of Sirius, of Ron and Hermione, of Ginny and even Luna, that drives him out. Harry's love becomes a weapon, not a shield. Voldemort flees not because he is overpowered, but because he is outmatched by something he cannot comprehend. In Half-Blood Prince, we see the boy Tom Riddle through Dumbledore's eyes. We see him asking about Horcruxes with a cold curiosity. And how does one split his soul? He asks. Dumbledore later reflects, "You must understand that Voldemort is perhaps the most dangerous dark wizard of all time, but he never had friends, not one. I think he did not want them." It wasn't just that Voldemort lacked love. He rejected it. He believed it to be a vulnerability. Harry, by contrast, survives because he chooses connection. In every book he risks his life not out of obligation, but love. For Sirius, for his friends, even for Draco in Deathly Hallows, when he saves him from the fire. He makes mistakes, yes, but he never turns away from people. Even when he walks into the forbidden forest to die, he does so with love, not for glory, not out of despair, but so that others might live. Voldemort's ignorance of love leads him to miscalculate again and again. He believes he can control Draco by threatening his family. He believes Severus's loyalty is secured through ambition. He believes the Elder Wand will obey him because he wields power. But magic in the world-ruling builds does not work that way. Wands choose their masters. Allegiances form through bonds, not commands. When Voldemort kills Snape, he thinks it will give him mastery over the wand. But the wand's allegiance lies with Harry, because Harry disarmed Draco, and Draco had earlier disarmed Dumbledore. It is not logic that governs this, it is connection. In that final confrontation in the Great Hall, Voldemort stands alone, even as his enemies stand together. Narcissa Malfoy, who lies to him in the forest, does so not from rebellion, but from maternal love. She wants to know if her son is alive. That one lie breaks his control over her, and the tide begins to shift. Harry, thought dead, returns, and Voldemort, in the final duel, is defeated not just by a spell, but by the weight of everything he refused to understand. "Try for some remorse, Tom," Harry says. "Be a man. Try for some remorse." But Voldemort cannot. It is not in him. He is incapable of the very thing that might save him. His face contorts not in rage, but in disbelief. The wand backfires. The soul fragment, the last piece of a broken being, is undone. And in silence, Tom Riddle dies. A man who tried to conquer death but never learned how to live. The tragedy is not that Voldemort was evil, it is that he was empty. His life was a series of choices made in fear, masked as strength. He feared death, feared weakness, feared being forgotten. And so he pursued power, but power without love is dust. His empire of fear crumbled because it had no roots, no loyalty that wasn't coerced. Love, in contrast, endures. It outlasts hatred, overcomes curses, and turns even the most broken into something human again. Even Kreacher, the bitter old house elf, transforms when shown kindness. When Harry treats him with respect, Kreacher becomes loyal, not because of magic, but because of love. Dobby, too, acts not from orders but from a deep affection. These moments, seemingly minor, are foundational. They show a world governed not just by spells but by emotions, and the consequences of failing to understand them. Rowling's books do not idealize love. They portray it in its full complexity, flawed, painful, often tragic. But they insist on its value. The love between James and Lily, between Molly and her children, between friends and even enemies, becomes the thread that binds the story. Voldemort, in cutting himself off from it, did not merely make a tactical error. He denied his own humanity, and in doing so he became something less than mortal and far weaker than he believed. There is a passage in the Philosopher's Stone where Dumbledore tells Harry, "To have been loved so deeply, even though the person who loved us is gone, will give us some protection forever." That protection is not just magical, as it is spiritual. It is the kind of armor that Voldemort could never forge, because it cannot be taken. It must be given, and he never gave anything. In the end, Harry does not defeat Voldemort with hatred. He does not strike from vengeance. He pities him. He offers him a chance, even in the last breath, to choose love. And when Voldemort refuses, it becomes clear the true power was never the Elder Wand, or the Horcruxes, or the Hallows. It was love, unyielding, unmeasurable, and eternal. Number 19. The Real Reason. Harry could see Voldemort's thoughts, Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince. It began with a scar, shaped like a bolt of lightning, etched into the forehead of a boy who lived. A scar that throbbed not from an old wound, but from a connection deeper and more sinister than any healer at St. Mungo's could explain. From the earliest days of Harry Potter's time at Hogwarts, readers sensed there was something abnormal about this physical mark. But it was not until the Order of the Phoenix that the truth behind the scar, and what it really represented, began to unravel like a cursed scroll. Harry's dreams were not dreams, they were windows. And not just windows into places he had never seen, but into the mind of the most feared dark wizard of all time. Long before he understood the significance, Harry would bolt upright in bed, heart racing, drenched in sweat, having witnessed a snake slithering through corridors or a man screaming in pain. The snake was not just any serpent, it was Nagini, and the man writhing was not a stranger but Arthur Weasley, attacked at the Department of Mysteries. What no one yet understood was that Harry had seen the attack, not from afar, but through Voldemort's own eyes. Professor Dumbledore, silent and somber, withheld explanations for as long as he could. But when the attacks intensified and Harry's perception became less a fluke and more a dangerous pattern, the truth had to be faced. Harry and Voldemort shared a connection. Not one forged in fate, but in magic, dark, ancient, and born of murder. When Voldemort tried to kill Harry as a baby, his killing curse rebounded, shattering his body and his soul. In that catastrophic instant, a fragment of Voldemort's soul broke off and latched onto the only living thing in the room, the child he failed to destroy. In The Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore finally states what readers had long suspected. "You were the seventh Horcrux, Harry, the Horcrux he never meant to make." This horrifying revelation cast all of Harry's past experiences in a new light. Every stabbing pain in his scar, every moment of rage that wasn't quite his own, it wasn't chance nor prophecy, but the residue of another soul festering inside him. Harry was, quite literally, haunted. Because of this unintentional Horcrux, Harry had a sliver of Voldemort's soul inside him. This was not metaphorical or poetic. It was as real as the locket, or the diary, or the ring. And souls, as Dumbledore warned, are not meant to be split. Murder rips the soul apart, he had explained to Harry. Voldemort, having committed so many murders, had torn his soul into unstable pieces. One of those pieces took root in Harry's very being, giving him not only a part of Voldemort's essence, but also an unfiltered connection to his thoughts, his emotions, and his memories. In the Order of the Phoenix, Harry's psyche began to erode under the pressure of this link. Unlike earlier years when his scar merely burned in Voldemort's presence, now Harry was assaulted with visions, uncontrollable and vivid. He found himself inside the body of the Dark Lord, watching, feeling. The snake reared and struck. Harry felt a white-hot, piercing pain in his forehead, the book recounts, during the attack on Arthur Weasley. It wasn't just empathy, it was possession. Harry was, in those moments, less himself and more the monster he had spent his life fighting. This terrified Dumbledore, not only because the link made Harry vulnerable, but because it made him similar. Voldemort had found a way to push his consciousness into Harry's mind, exploiting the bridge between them. This is why Dumbledore avoided Harry during that year, not out of coldness, but out of fear that Voldemort might exploit their connection to see into the Order's plans. "I cared about you too much," Dumbledore later admitted, regretting the silence that left Harry alone in confusion. But the psychic connection did more than allow for intrusion. It sowed doubt inside Harry. As the dreams continued and the line between his thoughts and Voldemort's blurred, Harry began to question his identity. Could he be part dark wizard? Could he be dangerous? "I'm becoming him," Harry mutters, overwhelmed by his own fury and fear after attacking Bellatrix at the Ministry. "I'd like to cause her pain," he confesses, his voice trembling. The idea that he could become Voldemort wasn't just a horror, it became a genuine psychological torment. In one harrowing scene, Sirius Black attempts to reassure him, stating, "You're not a bad person, you're a very good person who bad things have happened to." But Harry is unconvinced. He feels Voldemort's emotions too clearly, too intensely. The rage that floods him when the Dark Lord is angry, the triumph that fills him when Voldemort succeeds. These emotions aren't natural, they are infectious, like poison seeping through the bloodstream of the soul. Snape's occlumency lessons introduced in the Order of the Phoenix were an attempt to seal that open door. Yet the sessions failed spectacularly. Harry's resistance, Snape's cruelty, and the chaotic power of the connection made it impossible. Worse still, the lessons exposed Harry to Snape's own memories, blurring the line between protector and abuser, between teacher and tormentor. It is in these lessons that we see how fragile Harry's mind has become, how the weight of carrying a soul fragment has begun to crack him. The films, for all their visual splendor, tragically ignore this psychological warfare. They portray Harry's visions as occasional magical glitches rather than the profound existential terror they truly are. Nowhere in the films is the scene where Harry isolates himself in Grimmauld Place, afraid to touch anyone, convinced he is the weapon Voldemort is using, nor do they show the moment when Harry begs Sirius to tell him he's not bad, not like him. These moments, raw, painful, human, are the soul of the books, and they are lost in adaptation. In The Half-Blood Prince, the connection remains, but Voldemort begins to guard his mind more carefully. The focus shifts as Harry now uses the pensive and Dumbledore's collected memories to learn about Voldemort's past deliberately. Yet even then, the link pulses in the background. In Slughorn's memory, when the young Tom Riddle asks about Horcruxes, Harry feels more than curiosity. He feels dread, revulsion, but also familiarity. It was as though a cold hand had gripped his heart. The book says, it is not just fear, it is recognition. One of the most telling moments comes when Harry uses the Sectum Sempra curse on Draco Malfoy. The spell, violent and dark, came from the Half-Blood Prince's book, but it awakened something deeper in Harry. The violence startled even him. Blood spurted from Malfoy's face and chest, as though he had been slashed with an invisible sword. In the aftermath, Harry is not only horrified, he is afraid of himself. This fear is rooted in more than the spell. It's in the knowledge that something within him responds to darkness. Throughout both books, this internal conflict grows. The visions, the reactions, the emotional bleed between Voldemort and Harry become increasingly suffocating. He can feel Voldemort's fury when the locket is stolen, his panic when his plans are threatened. It is as if their souls, though distinct, are intertwined like twin serpents coiling in the same pit of darkness. And yet Harry's humanity never falters completely. He is afraid of becoming like Voldemort, but that fear is what keeps him from doing so. Dumbledore explains that love is the difference. "It was your heart that saved you," he tells Harry. And yet, this comfort is not enough to remove the burden. When Harry learns that he must die, that he is the Horcrux which must be destroyed, he accepts it not with heroism, but with resignation. "Does it hurt?" he asks his parents, shades in the forest, echoing the vulnerability of a child walking into death. The psychic connection is ultimately severed in the Deathly Hallows when Voldemort kills the part of his soul inside Harry. Only then is Harry free from the invasive presence that haunted him for years. And yet, even afterward, remnants remain. He understands Voldemort in ways no one else does. He pities him. "Try for some remorse, Tom," he says in their final confrontation. That Harry can pity Voldemort after everything is perhaps the greatest sign of his resilience. What the films miss is this truth, that the connection between Harry and Voldemort was never a gimmick or plot device. It was a war inside the soul. It was about identity, the danger of becoming the thing you fight, and the strength it takes to resist. It was about trauma, about a child marked by death, carrying evil within him and still choosing good. That's not just magic, that's character. In the end, Harry's story is not just about defeating Voldemort, it is about resisting the Voldemort inside him, a task far more difficult than dueling or wand work. The real battle was in his mind, night after night, vision after vision, fear after fear. He fought not just to survive, but to remain himself, and that fight, the invisible internal one, was the most heroic of all. Number 20, why Voldemort couldn't kill baby Harry, Philosopher's Stone. It was a night that split the wizarding world in two, the night Lord Voldemort vanished, the night a baby boy lived. That boy was Harry James Potter, and the Dark Lord who had torn families apart and ruled in terror disappeared in a flash of green light and an infant's cry. To most wizards, it seemed nothing short of a miracle. But in the deeper folds of magical lore and forgotten enchantments, the explanation lay not in coincidence or luck, but in an ancient kind of magic, one that Voldemort had never understood and could never wield. It was the power of love. The moment Voldemort arrived at the small house in Godric's Hollow, he was confident. He had tracked the Potters through a betrayal. Peter Pettigrew had turned them over in exchange for his life. With a single word, Avada Kedavra, James Potter died in the hallway, unarmed and without resistance. He never had a chance to reach his wand. Lily screamed. She ran, and Voldemort climbed the stairs, his wand already raised, thinking it was over. The child would die, and the prophecy would be broken. But magic, in its oldest forms, is not simply about power. It is about intention, emotion, and choice. And Lily made a choice. When Voldemort told her to step aside, when he offered her a sliver of mercy, she refused. She did not hesitate. She did not plead for her life. She pleaded only for her sons. It was not weakness. It was the deliberate invocation of something stronger than any spell. Dumbledore would later explain that Lily invoked a protection, ancient and binding, a blood magic rooted in sacrificial love. To have been loved so deeply, even though the person who loved us is gone, will give us some protection forever, he tells Harry in the Philosopher's Stone. That protection was not theoretical. It had real, physical consequences. Voldemort's killing curse, the deadliest spell in existence, rebounded. This was not merely a deflection of magic, as though Harry wore armor. It was a magical reversal caused by a layered enchantment, the product of Lily's sacrifice and Voldemort's specific crime. He had not only tried to kill a baby, he had destroyed someone who invoked the purest magic known, love freely given unto death. And in doing so, he created the condition for his own undoing. As Dumbledore put it, he put a bit of himself in Harry. The power of this protection was so absolute that even Voldemort's wand, crafted from you and attuned to destruction, could not penetrate it. When he cast the curse at Harry, it snapped back at him. An act never before recorded in magical history. Voldemort's body was destroyed not by Harry's spellwork, but by the backfiring of his own dark intent against a magic he neither respected nor comprehended. It is tempting to see this moment as the end of the story. Voldemort is gone. Harry is alive. But Dumbledore understood that magic of this kind does not simply vanish. He knew that Voldemort would return, and so he made a decision that would reinforce the protection Lily had given. He sent Harry to live with Petunia Dursley, Lily's sister, who shared her blood. In The Half-Blood Prince, Dumbledore explains to Harry that, as long as you can call home the place where your mother's blood dwells, there you cannot be touched or harmed by Voldemort. The enchantment was maintained not simply by memory, but by proximity to the bloodline. By anchoring the sacrifice in the mundane setting of Privet Drive, Dumbledore ensured that the protection would remain sealed until Harry came of age. This is why Voldemort, despite his obsession with power and immortality, failed so utterly. He could not grasp the idea that love could be stronger than death. His entire magical philosophy, rooted in domination, fear, and blood purity, left no room for what he saw as weakness. But love, particularly sacrificial love, is not weakness. It is binding magic of the oldest kind. The spell Voldemort used, the Killing Curse, requires absolute intent. It is not a spell that can be used lightly or experimentally. It demands a complete and conscious will to kill. Voldemort's curse had every ounce of that will behind it, and still it failed. That failure marked the moment when his soul began to fracture beyond repair. When Voldemort's soul tore from his body, it did not dissipate into nothing. Instead, it latched onto the only living thing in the room, Harry, and thus was born an unintended Horcrux, not created with a spell but by accident, a side effect of the failed curse and the shattered soul. A fragment of Voldemort, desperate to survive, embedded itself in the child's scar. "You were the Horcrux he never meant to make," Dumbledore reveals in the Deathly Hallows. This too ties back to the protection of Lily's love. The part of Voldemort inside Harry could not possess him or corrupt him in the same way it would a cursed object. Love repelled it. Though Harry suffered, the pain in his scar, the visions, the Parseltongue, he remained himself. His soul remained whole because it was wrapped in a magic Voldemort could never undo. When Harry first touches Professor Quirrell's hand in the Philosopher's Stone, the protection reveals itself again. Quirrell, who has been possessed by Voldemort, burns at the touch, not because Harry cast a spell, not because he wished it, but because of the blood-based protection Lily gave him. Voldemort cannot bear to touch what is steeped in love. The films hint at this, particularly in the final scenes of the Philosopher's Stone. But they never fully explain the magnitude of what Lily did. Her act was not symbolic, it was magical law. By choosing to die rather than hand over her child, she enacted a protection Voldemort could neither foresee nor destroy. The book makes this clear. Dumbledore tells Harry, "Your mother died to save you." If there is one thing Voldemort cannot understand, it is love. To Voldemort, who saw death as the ultimate failure, the idea of sacrificing oneself for another was an alien concept. It is ironic, then, that the boy he tried to kill, the one whom he marked as his equal, was the living embodiment of the one thing Voldemort feared: love made real through action. Harry was not a powerful wizard as a baby. He had no defense, no training, no wand, and yet he survived the deadliest spell in the wizarding world, not by deflecting it, but by standing under the shield of someone else's love. That is why, in the Order of the Phoenix, when Dumbledore says, "There is a room in the Department of Mysteries that is kept locked at all times," it contains a force that is at once more wonderful and more terrible than death, than human intelligence, than the forces of nature. He speaks of love. This is not metaphor. In the Department of Mysteries, love is treated as a literal magical force, studied, guarded, and feared. And yet Voldemort never tried to learn it. He dismissed it. And because he did, he lost everything. The spell he cast in Godric's Hollow was not repelled by defensive skill, it was turned back by something he would never value, and thus could never master. It is also worth noting that this protection had limits. It did not make Harry invulnerable. He could be harmed by others, as the many cuts and bruises of his childhood prove. But when Voldemort himself tried to harm him, he was thwarted, again and again, until he took Harry's blood in the Goblet of Fire. By doing so, Voldemort partially broke the charm, but in a cruel twist, he also ensured that Harry would remain tethered to life as long as Voldemort lived. The protection, a mother's love, still ran through Voldemort's own veins. That blood would prove fatal to Voldemort in the end. For when Harry walked willingly into the Forbidden Forest to die, as his mother had done before him, he too enacted a deep, magical protection. His willing sacrifice created a shield for his friends. Voldemort struck him down, but the spell failed once more. Harry returned. Love, again, proved stronger than death. Thus, the story that began with a mother's scream and a green flash did not end in silence. It echoed through every book, every battle, every victory. Voldemort could not kill Harry because Harry had been loved more deeply than Voldemort could imagine. That love, rooted in choice and sealed in blood, became the one magic Voldemort never possessed, and the one that would defeat him in the end. Had Voldemort understood the nature of the spell Lily cast, he might have chosen differently. He might have used someone else to fulfill the prophecy, spared her life, and left the baby untouched. But he could not resist the need to destroy what he feared, and so the curse failed, the scar remained, and the world changed forever. In the end, Harry's survival was not a fluke of fate. It was the deliberate consequence of a mother's decision and a wizard's failure to understand that some powers cannot be taken by force. They must be given freely, painfully, and with love. Number 21. What Patronuses really reveal. Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince. In the darkened halls of the Department of Mysteries, a burst of silver light leapt into the air, a protective creature born not of muscle or wand work, but of memory, love, and purpose. The Patronus charm, first introduced to readers in Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, is far more than just a weapon against Dementors. It is the manifestation of a wizard's deepest self, the soul, distilled into form. And while the films offer only a fleeting glance at these silvery guardians, the books, particularly Order of the Phoenix and Half-Blood Prince, unveil their raw emotional weight. They are echoes of longing, declarations of loyalty, and tributes to lost love. Hermione Granger's Patronus is an otter. It's an animal known for its intelligence, agility, and curiosity. It thrives near water, a habitat associated with emotion and intuition. This matches Hermione's personality in ways both obvious and symbolic. She is quick-witted, logical, yet deeply caring beneath her composed exterior. J.K. Rowling herself once admitted that she gave Hermione the otter because it is her own favourite animal, a subtle way of embedding the author's heart into the brightest witch of her age. When Hermione casts her Patronus during Dumbledore's army meetings, it is not just spell work. It is a celebration of her inner harmony, a balance of mind and heart. Harry Potter's Patronus the Stag is more than a coincidence. It is an inheritance not by bloodline alone, but by emotional resonance. His father, James Potter, was also a stag in his animagus form, a creature known for its nobility, strength, and watchfulness. "Expecto Patronum," Harry cries at the edge of the lake in Prisoner of Azkaban, believing his father will appear to save him. Instead, it is Harry himself who conjures the massive silver stag, a moment of self-realization, so profound it shapes his future. In Order of the Phoenix, when Harry leads the DA and helps others learn to summon their Patronuses, he is sharing more than a spell. He is passing on the emotional resilience that defines him. Yet among all the Patronuses, none strike deeper than Severus Snape's. In The Half-Blood Prince, Snape remains a mystery, a man of cold bitterness and biting words. But it is in the Deathly Hallows, as Harry relives Snape's memories, that the truth emerges. A silver doe steps into the forest, delicate and luminous, guiding Harry to the sword of Gryffindor. "The doe," Dumbledore whispers in a memory, "but your Patronus, it is the same as—" And Snape answers, without hesitation, "Always." That single word unravels the enigma of his life. Snape's Patronus, a doe, mirrors that of Lily Evans, Harry's mother. It is a symbol of the love he never abandoned. Unlike animagus forms, which a witch or wizard can learn to assume, Patronuses emerge unbidden, shaped by emotion. The fact that Snape's has remained unchanged for so many years reveals a singular truth. His heart has belonged to Lily since childhood. Even after her marriage to James, even after her death, that part of Snape's soul remained untouched. The films touch upon this, but only the book gives weight to that breathtaking moment when the form of the doe drifts through the forest, silent and pure. Dumbledore's reaction to Snape's Patronus is equally telling. The great headmaster, known for his own shadows and regrets, is moved beyond words. His eyes fill with tears, and it is in that instant he knows Snape's allegiance is absolute. Not to the Order, not to Hogwarts, but to Lily. And that, more than any oath or mission, is what gives Snape the strength to walk a double path. Spy, traitor, protector. In Order of the Phoenix, the Patronus becomes a lifeline in more ways than one. When Umbridge tightens her grip on Hogwarts and the corridors grow darker, Harry finds solace in teaching others to conjure these protective creatures. It is during these meetings, in the Room of Requirement, that we see Luna Lovegood's Patronus take the shape of a hare, symbolic of her ethereal, elusive nature. Luna is not like the others. She sees the world through a different lens, often misunderstood, often mocked. But her Patronus is swift, light-footed, and entirely hers. It is a spell of self-acceptance, a declaration that her uniqueness is her strength. Ron Weasley's Patronus, a Jack Russell Terrier, adds a layer of emotional depth often missed. This breed is loyal, energetic, and brave, qualities Ron embodies when pushed beyond insecurity. Interestingly, Jack Russells are known to chase otters. The symbolism isn't lost. Ron's Patronus playfully chases Hermione's. Even magic, it seems, can't ignore their connection. And though Ron struggles with feelings of inadequacy, especially in Half-Blood Prince, where jealousy clouds his judgment, his Patronus never falters. It reflects the core of who he is, devoted, protective, and courageous. Kingsley Shacklebolt's Patronus, a lynx, roars onto the scene in Deathly Hallows as a warning to the Burrow. The Ministry has fallen. Scrimgeour is dead. They are coming. The lynx is majestic, stealthy, and precise. Just like Kingsley himself, it is also a predator that watches from the shadows, echoing Kingsley's work as an aura and his role in the Resistance. His Patronus carries not just protection, but news, a beacon of vigilance in times of war. Dolores Umbridge, by contrast, conjures a cat. Her Patronus is a reflection not of warmth, but of control. Cats are creatures of independence, but Umbridge's silver feline paces with calculation. It is a facade, much like Umbridge herself. Her ability to produce a Patronus while tormenting others and feeding off power reveals something sinister. She finds joy in cruelty, and that twisted satisfaction is enough to ward off even Dementors. Her Patronus does not make her noble, it makes her dangerous. Then there is Cho Chang's Patronus, a swan. In mythology, swans are associated with beauty, loyalty, and grief. Cho, mourning Cedric Diggory's death, finds her emotions overwhelming during DA meetings. But her Patronus suggests a deeper strength beneath her tears. The swan is graceful but fiercely protective of its own. Though Harry eventually distances himself from her, the form of her Patronus remains a poetic reflection of her journey through heartbreak and healing. Minerva McGonagall's Patronus, a cat with spectacle markings, mirrors her animagus form. It is not just a representation of herself, but a symbol of transformation and control. In Deathly Hallows, when she sends 3 Patronuses galloping through the halls to summon help, the image is unforgettable. Her Patronus doesn't just defend, it commands. It becomes an extension of her leadership, her resolve, and her unshakable loyalty to Hogwarts. Arthur Weasley's Patronus, never shown in the films, is a weasel, fitting both his name and his unpretentious warmth. Weasels are often underestimated, yet clever and quick. Arthur's Patronus symbolizes not just his character, but his values, humility, family, and cleverness under pressure. When he works at the ministry surrounded by pomp and paranoia, his unassuming nature becomes his armor, and his Patronus, a tribute to the strength of simplicity. The same charm becomes a test of love and identity for Nymphadora Tonks. Her original Patronus was a jackrabbit, but after falling in love with Remus Lupin, it changes to a wolf, a mirror of his own nature. The Patronus often mutates to take the image of the love of one's life, Rowling once explained. And so it does. Tonks's Patronus shifts because her love for Lupin is so all-consuming, so defining, that it transforms the very core of her magic. Lupin, burdened by self-loathing and fear of fatherhood, tries to push her away. But her Patronus speaks louder than words. It is love, undeniable and luminous. Albus Dumbledore's Patronus is a phoenix, a creature of rebirth, endurance, and fire. Of all Patronuses, his is perhaps the most symbolic. The phoenix bursts into flame, only to rise again from ashes, just as Dumbledore has rebuilt himself from the mistakes of youth. Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love. Dumbledore's Patronus is a reminder that even the most powerful wizards carry grief, and from that grief comes rebirth. His Patronus is not just a guardian, but a flame against the dark. Even Aberforth Dumbledore's Patronus, the goat, speaks volumes. Often dismissed or mocked, Aberforth is rough around the edges, living in the shadow of his brother. Yet when he sends his Patronus to rescue Harry and his friends in Deathly Hallows, it reveals the depth of his character. The goat is stubborn, resilient, and fiercely loyal, a fitting emblem of a man who chose to protect rather than preach. Aberforth does not need grandeur. His Patronus tells his story plainly and proudly. Perhaps no chapter captures the emotional scope of the Patronus more than when Harry witnesses Snape's memory in The Prince's Tale. The silvery doe drifting through the trees becomes the heart of the entire saga. After all this time? Dumbledore asks, and Snape answers, always. The word, simple and small, shakes the foundation of everything we thought we knew. His Patronus is not a tool. It is grief made magic. A broken man in love with a memory, forging his life around a single, undying emotion. The Patronus charm, then, is not merely a spell but a revelation. It unveils identity, it reflects transformation, it exposes longing, devotion, and truth. In the Order of the Phoenix, it binds the young together in rebellion. In Half-Blood Prince, it becomes a window into secrets long kept. And through it all, it tells us what no character dares to say aloud. Their Patronuses say it for them. Number 22. Why Draco couldn't kill Dumbledore, Half-Blood Prince. The astronomy tower stood quiet, silver light from the moon spilling over its stones like a whispered secret. Beneath that cold glow, a boy raised his wand with a trembling hand. The moment was poised between life and death. And though everything had led to this, the mission, the pressure, the looming threat of Voldemort, Draco Malfoy couldn't say the words. He couldn't kill. Draco's journey through Half-Blood Prince is not a loud one. It slinks in the shadows, curled beneath cold gazes and closed doors. The film shows us the surface, pale skin, haunted eyes, whispered footsteps, but the book cracks him open. There, J.K. Rowling does not hide his fear. She lets it spill. "I haven't got any options," he tells Dumbledore, eyes wild. "I've got to do it. He'll kill me. He'll kill my whole family." This was never about power. It was about survival. And in that, Draco is more human than perhaps any character in the series. He had always been a boy of swagger. From the first moment on the Hogwarts Express, Draco presented himself as royalty, disdainful of the Weasleys, proud of his blood, drunk on the air of entitlement. But in Half-Blood Prince, the mask slips. Assigned the impossible task of assassinating Albus Dumbledore, Draco is no longer performing. He is unraveling. The pressure is not merely academic. Voldemort does not give second chances. The moment Draco receives his mission, he is marked, not by a dark mark on his arm, but by dread in his soul. His father, Lucius, is disgraced. His mother, Narcissa, pleads with Severus Snape to protect him. Their visit to Spinner's End is a harrowing act of desperation, and the unbreakable vow that Snape swears that night, to protect Draco and finish the task if he fails, casts a long shadow over everything that follows. At first, Draco clings to the illusion of control. He walks the halls of Hogwarts like a ghost prince, separate from the others, obsessed with a single goal. The vanishing cabinet becomes his sanctuary and his curse. It's a mechanical puzzle, a dangerous riddle. Every failed attempt drives him deeper into isolation. And still he persists. "I'm the only one who can do it," he mutters. But he is lying, to others and to himself. The boy who once delighted in cruel jokes now withers under the weight of real consequences. He stops mocking Harry, he stops speaking much at all. He disappears behind corners, emerging with darker circles under his eyes each time. His magic suffers, his posture shrinks. At one point, moaning Myrtle finds him sobbing in the bathroom, and she is the only one who sees him clearly, not as a villain, but as a frightened child crumbling under impossible expectations. Rowling never redeems Draco. She does not turn him into a hero, but she complicates him. And that complexity is what makes his failure to kill Dumbledore so powerful. It is not defiance, it is collapse. Standing on the tower, face to face with the man he is supposed to kill, Draco's hand shakes, his voice falters. He does not lower his wand, but he does not strike either. Dumbledore, calm and bleeding, speaks to him gently. "Draco, Draco, you are not a killer." That line is not a taunt. It is a mercy. In that moment, Draco is offered something Voldemort never does, choice. And he takes it, or rather, he chooses not to take a life. The tragedy is that no one claps for Draco. No one rewards him for sparing Dumbledore. He is not hailed as brave. He is swept away in shame, caught between a war he did not start and loyalties he did not choose. The next time we see him, he is at Malfoy Manor, pale and quieter still, avoiding eye contact as Death Eaters take over his home. He has not won, he has merely survived. But survival matters. When we look at other characters in the series, we see clearer lines. Harry fights, Hermione solves, Ron jokes and flinches and returns, Snape spies, Dumbledore schemes. But Draco, in Half-Blood Prince, is simply drowning. And in that, he represents something often overlooked in wartime, the pressure of youth caught in adult cruelty. He is a victim, a pawn, and occasionally a coward. But he is also someone who refused to kill, even when every road led there. It is easy to mock Draco. He is arrogant, petulant, and frequently mean-spirited. But in this book, we see why. He was raised in a family that valued blood over kindness, power over empathy. And yet, when faced with the ultimate test of that ideology, tasked to kill in cold blood, he fails. That failure is, paradoxically, his salvation. The cabinet he spends months fixing is symbolic. It is broken, like him. He tries to connect two worlds, one in Hogwarts, the other in Borgin and Berks. But every attempt to fix it only isolates him further. He locks himself away in the room of requirement, where the walls listen but do not speak. There he becomes his own prisoner, hiding not just his plan but his soul. Harry suspects something is wrong, but he misreads it. He thinks Draco is becoming more dangerous. In truth, Draco is becoming more fragile. Their duel in the bathroom is violent but telling. When Harry strikes him with Sectum Sempra, a curse he barely understands, Draco bleeds heavily. He is not the untouchable foe anymore. He is a boy on the brink. Snape arrives, heals him, and stares at Harry with fury. But what goes unspoken is the deeper truth. Both boys are trapped, Harry by prophecy, Draco by oath, and Snape by both. In this triangle of fate, Draco is the one who least understands the rules and pays the heaviest emotional price. Dumbledore, ever the manipulator, sees this. He watches Draco carefully, not with suspicion, but with sorrow. When they finally speak on the tower, he does not try to fight. He simply listens. "You are not a killer, Draco," he says again. And Draco, despite his wand, does not protest. The boy who once boasted about wanting to join Voldemort now stands paralyzed by the horror of actually doing his bidding. The arrival of the Death Eaters ends the moment. They storm the tower, cruel and eager. Bellatrix encourages Draco, but still he does not act. Even then, even surrounded by allies, with Dumbledore defenseless, Draco cannot cross the line, and it is Snape, not Draco, who casts the fatal curse. This is crucial. Snape does what Draco could not out of hatred, but out of protection. His unbreakable vow forces him to act, and he does. The cost is enormous, but in doing so, he preserves Draco's soul. Rowling's world is full of choices and full of consequences. Some characters choose darkness, some choose light. Draco is caught between, and in that liminal space he chooses inaction. It is a quiet rebellion, no grand speeches, no redemption arc, just a trembling boy lowering his wand. There is another detail worth noting. Throughout the book, Draco becomes increasingly alone. Even his fellow Slytherins don't know the full story. Pansy Parkinson offers concern, but he pushes her away. Crabbe and Goyle, once his loyal shadows, are reduced to accomplices. Draco does not confide, he suffers in silence. And that silence is where the character grows. By the time we reach the Battle of Hogwarts in the next book, Draco's arc is clearer. He's no longer proud, no longer sneering. He runs, hides, pleads. And though he never joins the fight, he also never joins the killing. He is not a Death Eater in his soul, just a boy forced to wear the mask. Many fans criticize the films for softening certain characters, but in Draco's case, they actually obscure his depth. The sixth movie shows us shadows but not substance. We see him fix the cabinet. We see his haunted looks, but we don't hear his thoughts, feel his panic, or understand his motives. The book, in contrast, gives us his fear in raw detail. He seemed a shadow of his usual self, Rowling writes. His good looks were spoiled by worry, and there were dark shadows under his eyes. These are not signs of villainy. They are symptoms of torment. He does not become cold, he becomes consumed. In the end, Draco does not deserve a medal. He does not need one. His courage is not the stuff of headlines. It is the quiet kind, the kind that stands still when everything demands motion, and that is what makes his choice so moving. When offered the path of murder, he hesitates. And in that hesitation, he remains human. Number 23. Why Voldemort's wand failed him. Deathly Hallows. The final duel between Harry Potter and Lord Voldemort in the Deathly Hallows film dazzles the eye with spinning cloaks, spiraling magic, and shattered stone. But behind the spectacle lies a truth the film barely touches, a truth rooted not in the force of spells or the speed of a wand movement, but in the complex, ancient allegiance of magical objects. In J.K. Rowling's world, victory is not simply about power, it is about understanding the deeper laws that govern magic, loyalty, and ownership. And Voldemort, for all his brilliance and might, ignored the oldest rule of all: a wand chooses its master. The Elder Wand, one of the three Deathly Hallows, is no ordinary magical tool. Wands have personalities, loyalties, and instincts. But the Elder Wand, the most powerful ever created, carries those qualities to a dangerous extreme. Known throughout history as the wand that cannot be beaten, it brings death and betrayal to those who seek to claim it without understanding its nature. Voldemort believed he could take it by force. He believed that possessing Dumbledore's wand would make him invincible, but he never paused to ask whether the wand would accept him. Voldemort stole the Elder Wand from Dumbledore's tomb. It was an act of desecration, power hunger, and raw ambition. He ripped the wand from the hands of a dead man, believing conquest alone was enough to earn its obedience. But the wand, ancient and wise, followed its own path. Its allegiance could not be stolen. It had to be earned, and that truth would become the fatal flaw in Voldemort's plan. To understand why the Elder Wand refused to serve Voldemort, we must return to the Astronomy Tower on that terrible night in Half-Blood Prince. There, Draco Malfoy disarmed Albus Dumbledore. It was not Voldemort, nor Snape, who first bested the great wizard. It was a 17-year-old boy trembling with doubt and fear. And yet, in the language of wand lore, it was Draco who became the wand's master from that moment. Disarming, not killing, is what matters in wand allegiance. It is not blood, but control. The Elder Wand recognized Draco as its true master, even if Draco never touched it. This is the kind of subtle, internal logic that governs Rowling's magical world. Magic, especially the oldest magic, moves not in loud explosions but in quiet shifts of loyalty. And so, when Voldemort took the wand from Dumbledore's corpse, he took a stick of wood without its heart. He wielded it, but it never truly wielded for him. Later, in Malfoy Manor, a key event unfolded, one which the film treats briefly but the book highlights with immense narrative weight. Harry, imprisoned with Ron and Hermione, manages to disarm Draco Malfoy during their escape. Expelliarmus, a spell Harry had always favoured not for its aggression, but its elegance, struck again. In that moment, Harry took not only Draco's wand, but also the allegiance of the Elder Wand. The magic understood. It recognized the chain of events. Harry had defeated the wand's master. This is why Voldemort's final strike failed. Throughout Deathly Hallows, Rowling builds attention around the Elder Wand without laying the logic bare until the end. We see Voldemort growing more unstable, more violent, as the wand resists him in subtle ways. He tortures Ollivander for answers, and the Wandmaker gives him a warning. "The wand chooses the wizard," Ollivander says with fear. That much has always been clear to those of us who have studied wand lore. But Voldemort does not study. He conquers. And that, above all, is what seals his fate. The final duel in the book is not a visual effects extravaganza. It is a scene of sharp, tense confrontation in the Great Hall, with the survivors of the battle watching. Voldemort laughs as Harry dares to challenge him, but Harry, now calm, reveals what Voldemort missed. "The wand's more powerful than any in existence, the Elder Wand," Harry says, "but it refuses to be yours, Tom, doesn't it?" And then comes the revelation. "You're right, but before you try to kill me, I'd advise you to think about what you've done. Think and try for some remorse." This line is critical, not only because it reflects Harry's refusal to become a killer, but because it shows the heart of his power, compassion, understanding, and the willingness to see magic as more than a weapon. Voldemort, by contrast, sees only domination. When Voldemort casts the final curse, Avada Kedavra, and Harry counters with Expelliarmus, something extraordinary happens. The Elder Wand, sensing its true master, turns in the air. Voldemort's spell rebounds, striking him down. Harry catches the wand as it arcs through the sky. He has not killed, he has defended, and magic, loyal to its master, finishes the duel. This is not sentimentality. This is not winning by friendship. It is a moment of deeply structured magical logic. In Rowling's world, wands are not tools. They are extensions of belief, of choice, of character. And the Elder Wand chose not the most ruthless wizard, but the one who understood it. Rowling gives us more than action in this moment. She gives us a reflection on how power truly works. Voldemort, for all his mastery of the dark arts, never mastered the deeper laws of magic. He severed his soul into fragments, believing that immortality was just a matter of calculation. He built a kingdom of fear, but he never respected the subtle rules that govern loyalty and connection. He broke everything that connected him to others, including the bond between wand and wizard. Harry, on the other hand, never sought the Elder Wand. He did not crave it, as Dumbledore once had. When he learns that he is the true master, he does not use it for glory. He repairs his original wand, the faithful holly and phoenix feather one, and returns the Elder Wand to Dumbledore's tomb. "I'm putting it back," he says, "where it came from. It's where it belongs. If I die a natural death like Ignotus, its power will be broken, won't it? The wand will lose its power." This choice defines him. Harry's strength lies not in superior spells, but in understanding what makes magic real. His humility, his loyalty, and his empathy are not just virtues, they are his greatest protections. They allow him to win a war without becoming a monster. The films, for all their brilliance, reduced this nuance. They made the final duel a spectacle and cut the careful web of wand allegiance. The line of ownership, Draco to Harry, is glossed over. The Elder Wand's internal struggle is turned into a silent special effect. Viewers unfamiliar with the books are left puzzled. How did Harry win? The answer is in the logic of the world, not the noise of the fight. Rowling constructs a universe where magical objects have memory, where intention matters, and where control must be earned through action. In this logic, Voldemort is doomed long before he casts the final spell. He is using a wand that does not recognize him. It resists him. And when it matters most, it betrays him, not out of spite, but out of fidelity to its true master. We see this logic reinforced throughout the series. When Ron takes Bellatrix Lestrange's wand, it behaves erratically. When Hermione uses a borrowed wand, she struggles. When Harry loses his own wand in Godric's Hollow, he mourns it like a lost friend. Wands are more than tools. They are companions, partners, extensions of will and soul. And so when Harry defeats Voldemort, it is not because of spectacle. It is because he understands these quiet truths. He knows the wand listens. He knows power is not the same as victory. He knows the Elder Wand, like all magic, answers to something older than might, loyalty. In that moment, as Voldemort collapses, unmade by his own curse, the world watches. But the real victory has already happened, silently, invisibly, in the logic of ownership. The Elder Wand made its choice, not for the cruelest nor the strongest, but for the boy who never wanted it at all. That is the genius of Rowling's world. Magic is not noise, it is meaning. It follows paths the arrogant never see. And in that final breath, as the Elder Wand returns to Harry's hand, the story closes not with a bang, but with an echo, the quiet, eternal truth that power alone is never enough. Number 24, Dudley's Redemption, Deathly Hallows. Dudley Dursley had always been a name synonymous with petty cruelty. To those who knew only the films, he remained a caricature of childhood spite, the cousin who pulled Harry's hair, threw tantrums over birthday presents, and never once showed a trace of remorse. But in the books, where every corner of J.K. Rowling's world is given its due weight, Dudley's story doesn't end in mockery. It ends in quiet redemption, and that, more than his insults or pig's tail, is what makes him human. From the very beginning, Dudley was introduced as a symbol of everything wrong in the Dursley household. Spoiled by Petunia and Vernon, coddled by a life of unchecked indulgence, he mirrored their hatred toward anything different. To them, Harry was a shame, a whisper of something unnatural. And Dudley, bred in that atmosphere of fear and disdain, became the willing enforcer. He was not evil in the way Voldemort was. His cruelty was casual, ignorant, and worst of all, learned. Harry's early years were shaped under Dudley's shadow. The cupboard under the stairs, the playground chases, the stolen birthday gifts, all served to remind the reader that Dudley was not simply a mean cousin, but a constant symbol of Harry's isolation in the Muggle world. There was a perverse joy Dudley took in Harry's misery, and Vernon and Petunia never corrected it. If anything, they celebrated it. Dudley was praised for every punch thrown and every insult whispered, as long as it aligned with the family's mission to keep Harry small. But that's only half the story. In Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, Rowling introduces a crack in Dudley's armor. The Dementor attack in Little Whinging was a narrative masterstroke. While it primarily served as a plot device to reintroduce the threat of Voldemort into the Muggle world, it also offered a rare and intimate look at Dudley's vulnerability. Stripped of bravado, left gasping and broken, he was forced to confront something he never understood: real fear. The trauma left him quieter, changed. It was the first moment the reader saw that the boy behind the fists was, after all, just a boy. Rowling didn't allow that thread to vanish. She wove it delicately through the background, letting it simmer beneath the surface of the final chapters. By the time we reach Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, the Dursleys are forced into hiding, under magical protection no less. For the first time in their lives, they must rely on the world they have long despised. And Dudley surprisingly does not resist. He begins to look at Harry not with hatred, but with a sense of confused respect. Something in him is stirring. The pivotal moment comes in a few lines so subtle they were tragically left out of the film adaptation. As the Dursleys prepare to leave Privet Drive forever, Harry assumes, based on years of history, that Dudley will not say goodbye. But then it happens. The boy who once delighted in Harry's pain now hesitates at the doorway. He lingers. He looks at his cousin, and he says the most unexpected thing: "I don't think you're a waste of space." That single sentence, nestled quietly in the pages of the Deathly Hallows, carries the weight of a decade. It is Dudley's apology, his olive branch, his confession. For years he had seen Harry through the lens his parents provided. Now, with the threat of Voldemort hovering over them all, Dudley begins to perceive the truth. Harry has always been braver, stronger, and more selfless than anyone ever gave him credit for, including Dudley. The emotional gravity of that moment cannot be overstated. For Harry, who had long accepted his role as the family's unwanted burden, this was a form of closure he never expected. It wasn't flowery or dramatic. It wasn't a teary embrace, but it was real. It was perhaps the only kind of apology Dudley could offer. The world he knew didn't have room for magic or emotion, but he carved a space for both in that moment. Even Hestia Jones, one of the witches assigned to protect the Dursleys, is startled by Dudley's gesture. She exclaims, "Blimey, Dudders, did you just say that Harry wasn't a waste of space?" The line is meant to offer a touch of humour, but it underscores just how radical this change truly is. No one expected it, not the magical protectors, not Harry, and certainly not the reader. Rowling ensures the gesture isn't forgotten. After Dudley and Harry shake hands, the narrative voice notes that the shock of Dudley's unexpected gesture had rendered Harry temporarily speechless. For a boy who had faced dragons and death itself, it was Dudley's compassion that left him reeling. The irony is beautiful, poignant. This wasn't a spell or a duel. It was humanity breaking through years of silence. Critically, this scene draws a line under the Dursley narrative. Petunia and Vernon remain unchanged, clinging to their prejudices to the bitter end. But Dudley becomes the exception. He is the first and only Dursley to take even a single step toward growth. And that step matters. It's Rowling's way of showing that bigotry, no matter how deeply rooted, is not immutable. People can change, even those we least expect. The emotional resonance of that scene lingers, even though the films discarded it. In the cinematic version of Deathly Hallows Part 1, the Dursleys are given a hasty exit. Dudley is there, standing stiffly near a car, but the moment is silent, empty. Gone is the line that defines his arc. Gone is the handshake. Gone is the transformation. It's as if the filmmakers believed the audience wouldn't care, but readers did. They still do. That deletion was more than a missed opportunity. It was a narrative injustice. Dudley's change wasn't just about him. It was a statement about the Dursley family, about prejudice, about the possibility of healing old wounds. By omitting it, the film flattened the story, reducing a layered character to a footnote. It erased the most powerful sign of growth the Muggle world ever offered Harry. In interviews, Rowling has mentioned that she even wrote a deleted scene for the film, where Harry and Dudley share a brief but sincere farewell. Actor Harry Melling, who played Dudley, expressed regret that the scene didn't make the final cut. He believed it was an important step for the character, and he was right. Dudley deserved that closure, and so did we. Literature often celebrates grand heroes and sweeping battles, but the best stories are often rooted in subtle human moments. Dudley's transformation doesn't come with fanfare or applause. It comes quietly in the shadows of war, in the margins of a chapter, but it is real, it is earned, and it shows that even the smallest gestures can carry the greatest meaning. More than that, it reframes Harry's past. Dudley's acknowledgement that Harry is not a waste of space forces us to reevaluate every chapter that came before, every shove, every insult, every meal stolen from under the cupboard door. All of it leads here to a boy who finally sees his cousin for who he truly is. It also highlights one of Rowling's recurring themes, the power of choice. Dudley was raised in a house of cruelty, taught to fear and mock the magical world, but he chooses something else. He chooses to look at Harry not as a freak, but as a person, a hero even. That choice echoes across the narrative. It is, in its own way, as powerful as any spell. The moment also deepens the complexity of the Dursley dynamic. Petunia and Vernon, frozen in their fear and disdain, cannot follow their son on this journey. Dudley leaves them behind, not just physically, but morally. He becomes more than their creation. He becomes his own person. And that, for a boy once known only for tantrums and cruelty, is the truest magic of all. Perhaps the most beautiful part of this scene is its simplicity. Dudley doesn't give a speech. He doesn't beg for forgiveness. He simply speaks the truth. He admits, in the only way he knows how, that Harry matters, that he always did. And in doing so, he opens the door not just for a new relationship, but for a new future. A future where kindness is possible, even for those who were never taught it. Years later, in the epilogue of Deathly Hallows, Rowling hints that Harry and Dudley remain in touch. They exchange Christmas cards, their children have playdates. The warmth doesn't come easily, but it comes, and that perhaps is the final piece of Dudley's arc. He doesn't just change for a moment, he continues to grow. Long after the war is over, long after the pages close, Dudley Dursley may have begun his story as a symbol of ignorance, but he ends it as a symbol of something far more powerful, redemption. In a world where heroes are often defined by wands and prophecy, Dudley's quiet transformation is a reminder that even the most unlikely people can become better. That change, when it comes from within, can be the strongest magic of all. Number 25. Regulus Black's Sacrifice, Half-Blood Prince and Deathly Hallows. In the vast tapestry of the Second Wizarding War, there are names sung in full chorus: Harry Potter, Albus Dumbledore, Severus Snape. Yet among the whispered footnotes of heroism, one name, or rather 3 letters, flicker in obscurity. R.A.B. Regulus Arcturus Black. A Death Eater, a younger brother, a pure-blooded scion of the noble house of Black. And yet behind this aristocratic lineage lies one of the most courageous and quietly tragic stories in the entire saga. His name surfaces in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, scrawled at the bottom of a cryptic note. To the Dark Lord, I know I will be dead long before you read this. But this was no empty threat, no poetic flourish. It was a prophecy Regulus had already accepted as fact. Regulus Black grew up in the looming shadows of Grimmauld Place, the ancestral home of a family that worshipped blood purity like a creed. Unlike his rebellious brother Sirius, who rejected everything the family stood for and ran away, Regulus was the model son. He was polished, obedient, and a perfect heir to the family ideology. He joined the Death Eaters as a teenager, swept away by the glamour of Voldemort's rising power. To outsiders, his choice seemed inevitable. To his mother, Walburga, it was a source of pride, but no one looked beneath the surface of the boy who bore the family name like a chain around his neck. In truth, Regulus was not cut from the same cloth as other Death Eaters. He was not cruel for cruelty's sake, nor did he find joy in the suffering of others. He believed, as many young men do, in a cause he didn't fully understand. Voldemort was power, and power seemed like protection. But the illusion shattered the day he understood what that power was built upon: soul-splitting, death-defying, unnatural magic. Horcruxes. The word alone was enough to change the course of his short life. It was a discovery that came not through grand espionage or betrayal, but from a place both intimate and small, a house elf named Kreacher. Kreacher, bound by the cruel hierarchies of pure blood society, was Regulus's servant. But to Regulus, Kreacher was more than chattel. When Voldemort required a creature to test the protections around one of his Horcruxes, he used Kreacher as a disposable pawn. He brought the elf to the dark cave by the sea, forced him to drink a potion that inflicted unbearable agony, and left him to die. Kreacher survived by disapparating home, something Voldemort had not anticipated, for he had neither care nor understanding for house elves. When Kreacher returned, half-mad with trauma, Regulus listened. He asked questions. He cared. And that made all the difference. That a teenage boy brought up in the twisted values of blood supremacy could feel such loyalty, such compassion for a creature considered lesser. It marked the first fracture in his blind devotion to the Dark Lord. Upon learning the truth, Regulus's disillusionment was immediate. This was not the righteous order he thought he had joined. This was not glory, it was horror. Voldemort was not merely a political rebel. He was a man who tore his soul apart to tether himself to life, a master who treated allies as expendable things. Regulus's heart turned, and so began the final desperate plan of his life. He asked Kreacher to take him back to the cave. He did not explain the full weight of what he intended, only that the locket Voldemort had hidden must be retrieved and destroyed. Together they returned to that cursed shore. The potion was still there, glittering malevolently in the basin. Regulus drank it himself, knowing well what it would do to him. The pain overwhelmed him, as it had overwhelmed Dumbledore years later. In his final moments, he gave Kreacher one last order, to take the locket, to destroy it, and never to tell anyone what had truly happened. "You are not to tell my mother what I've done," he said. "You are not to tell my brother." That was Regulus, burning with duty and shame, afraid that even his redemption would be judged. Kreacher obeyed, and the boy who had everything, a noble name, a grand future, was dragged beneath the dark water by inferi, faceless corpses animated by evil. His death was unceremonious, his grave unmarked, and his tale buried along with him. It would take years before anyone even knew what he had done. In Deathly Hallows, Harry, Ron, and Hermione finally learned the truth. The fake locket they found, the one with the note signed R.A.B., was a decoy. Regulus had swapped the real Horcrux with a replica, defying the darkest wizard of the age. Hermione, ever the scholar, pieces it together first. But it is Kreacher, in his broken, croaking voice, who reveals the depth of his master's sacrifice. "Master Regulus was not a traitor," he says with trembling pride. "He was brave." Regulus's legacy was not carved in marble or sung in great halls. No Order of Merlin was awarded posthumously. His name was not cleared. And yet, in that one act, stealing a Horcrux, challenging the Dark Lord, and dying to undo his own mistake, Regulus changed everything. The chain of events that followed his sacrifice led, ultimately, to Voldemort's downfall. Harry, moved by Kreacher's grief and loyalty, treats the elf with kindness, and this, too, is part of Regulus's legacy. A small moment of empathy passed down like a ripple. Harry's attitude toward Kreacher shifts, and Kreacher, once bitter and cruel, becomes loyal and brave in turn. He leads the house elves into battle during the final fight at Hogwarts. Regulus's quiet humanity had not died with him. It had lived on. One cannot help but compare Regulus to his brother Sirius. Where Sirius raged against his family with fire and noise, Regulus acted in silence. Where Sirius burned away his past, Regulus tried to fix it. They were two sides of the same coin, one a rebel without a plan, the other a loyalist who saw the truth too late. Sirius might have been louder, more beloved, more remembered, but it is Regulus who looked evil in the eye and chose to stand against it, alone. The tragedy of Regulus lies in how young he was, barely 18 when he died, not even out of Hogwarts for a full year. A boy, really. But a boy who saw the weight of his choices and bore them with a courage that most men, twice his age, could not muster. He did not wait for a prophecy. He did not expect victory. He knew his death would not change the world immediately. He knew Voldemort might live on, but he also knew that doing nothing was worse. His story, buried in the margins of the main narrative, speaks to the unseen sacrifices in every war. Not all heroes are born with chosen ones' destinies. Some simply do the right thing, quietly, when no one is watching. Regulus Black is a ghost in the pages of Harry Potter, but his presence is profound. His name appears only briefly, but its echoes last until the very end. In the end, the locket was destroyed by Ron Weasley with the sword of Gryffindor, but it would never have been possible without Regulus. Without his note, without his theft, the trio might have wasted years. The foundations of their mission were built upon his death. The boy who turned from evil did more in one act than many do in a lifetime of speeches and wand-waving. Rowling herself wrote that bravery comes in many forms. Dumbledore had his wisdom, Snape had his love, Harry had his resolve, but Regulus had clarity. He saw the truth and it broke him, but he did not turn away. "I have stolen the real Horcrux and intend to destroy it as soon as I can," his note read. "I face death in the hope that when you meet your match, you will be mortal once more." It was not a note of vengeance. It was a note of duty, of atonement. He did not curse Voldemort. He simply acted. The horror of the Inferi, the darkness of the potion, the isolation of that cave, all these stand as metaphors for what it means to confront your own guilt. Regulus went into the abyss and never came back. But in doing so, he became something more than a Death Eater or a Black. He became a whisper of redemption. And still, the wizarding world never honored him. He remained a name on a family tapestry, a lost son, a cause for whispers. But readers remember, fans remember, and Harry, perhaps most importantly, remembered. When he spoke to Kreacher with respect, when he wore the locket, when he called Voldemort by his true name, he was walking in the shadow of Regulus's sacrifice. He had no idea how deep the connection ran, but perhaps that's the point. Regulus's story reminds us that bravery is often quiet, that real change begins not with noise but with a choice, a single decision to do what's right, even if it costs everything. He was a boy trapped in a family of darkness who reached for the light, and that makes him one of the most compelling and heartbreaking figures in the Harry Potter universe. Number 26, Why Harry Gave Up the Elder Wand, Deathly Hallows. Of all the wands in magical history, none is more feared or revered than the Elder Wand, the Death Stick, the unbeatable weapon carved from elder wood, holding within it a core of thestral tail hair. Its power is legendary, its legacy blood-stained. It was the final of the Deathly Hallows to come into Harry Potter's possession, and, perhaps, the most dangerous. When the Battle of Hogwarts ended, Voldemort lay dead by his own rebounding curse, defeated not by raw magical might, but by loyalty, intention, and understanding. In that moment, Harry held in his hands the wand that had passed from the likes of Antioch Peverell to Gellert Grindelwald to Albus Dumbledore, and now to him. But instead of claiming it as a king would a throne, Harry chose a different path. In the film adaptation of Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows, this moment is stripped of its depth. After Voldemort's defeat, Harry breaks the Elder Wand in two and tosses it off a bridge. It is a gesture that speaks of rejection, of finality, but it lacks context. Viewers are left without the emotional groundwork laid by the books. Why destroy the most powerful wand in existence? Why not keep it, protect it, or at least explain its fate? The decision is rendered mute, a silent flicker of rebellion rather than a carefully considered step toward peace. But in the book, J.K. Rowling gifts this moment with a quiet gravity. After the dust settles, after the bodies have been counted and the dead mourned, Harry takes the Elder Wand and makes a conscious choice. He does not destroy it. He does not use it for himself. Instead, he returns it to its last true owner, Albus Dumbledore. Climbing to the headmaster's office, Harry replaces the wand in the hands of the man who had tried to master death, not through domination, but through wisdom and humility. Harry hopes that by returning the wand to Dumbledore's tomb and living a life without its power, its line of conquest will end. This is more than a symbolic gesture. It is the final proof that Harry has grown beyond the boy who once longed for power, justice, and vengeance. He has seen what power does. He watched Tom Riddle twist the pursuit of immortality into murder. He saw how the Hallows corrupted Dumbledore, whose youthful dreams of a greater good led to the death of his sister, Ariana. And he witnessed firsthand the seductive pull of magical dominance during his encounter with the Resurrection Stone in the Forbidden Forest, when he faced his own death. Harry has walked through every corridor of temptation, and he has emerged not as a master but as a man who chooses to be free. When Ollivander, the wand maker, tells Harry that the wand chooses the wizard, he is speaking a truth that resonates throughout the series. The Elder Wand, however, complicates that idea. It chooses not based on loyalty or affinity, but on conquest. Its allegiance shifts only through disarming or killing. That is why it belonged to Draco Malfoy and not Voldemort in the end, and why it ultimately answered to Harry, because he had disarmed Draco at Malfoy Manor. The wand follows the law of might, not of right, and that in Harry's eyes makes it unworthy of use. Harry understands this. When asked by Ron whether he would keep the wand, Harry replies, "I'm putting it back where it came from. It can stay there. If I die a natural death like Ignotus, its power will be broken, won't it? The previous master won't have been defeated." He speaks not as a boy driven by wonder, but as a man who has endured loss, war, and sacrifice. He has lost his parents, his godfather, his mentor, and many friends. He has died and returned. He knows now that death is not an enemy to be defeated, but a reality to be faced with courage. Dumbledore himself confessed in The Tales of Beedle the Bard that he had once sought the Hallows, craving mastery over death. But in his later years he came to understand that this pursuit led only to suffering. The Elder Wand's legacy is one of blood and betrayal. "You are the worthy possessor of the Hallows," Dumbledore tells Harry in the book's final pages. But the true master does not seek power. Harry embodies this. He is not without flaw. He has made rash decisions, succumbed to anger, but he has never sought domination. Even in the final duel, he does not kill Voldemort. The Dark Lord's own spell rebounds upon him because he failed to understand the nature of loyalty, ownership, and love. The films reduce this rich moral journey to a moment of silent destruction. Harry's snapping of the wand is visually satisfying, but narratively hollow. It robs the viewer of the layered, painful reasoning behind the act. In the book, by returning the wand to Dumbledore's tomb, Harry is not destroying power, but laying it to rest. He acknowledges its history, its allure, and chooses peace over control. It is not a rejection of magic, but of domination. This act is Harry's true victory. It is not won in battle, but in restraint. He could have kept the wand. He could have repaired his own broken holly and phoenix feather wand. And indeed, he does just that before returning the Elder Wand. His loyalty to his first wand, the one that had been with him through so many trials, speaks volumes. He fixes it with the Elder Wand's power, then returns the Death Stick to Dumbledore, ensuring its power fades with him. In many ways, this choice mirrors Harry's entire journey, from the cupboard under the stairs, where he was nothing, to the boy who learned he was something, to the young man who chose not to be everything. The allure of the Hallows, especially the Elder Wand, is a temptation to believe oneself above others. But Harry has seen what becomes of those who believe that. He has fought against men who thought themselves gods. He has no desire to become one. Even more, this moment stands in contrast to Voldemort's own obsession. The Dark Lord never understood that the wand's loyalty could not be forced. He believed in possession, not connection. He sought the Elder Wand not to protect, but to conquer. He killed Snape under the mistaken belief that murder alone would transfer the wand's power. In doing so, he demonstrated his fatal flaw. the inability to see people, to see love, to see anything beyond power. Harry's refusal to use the wand is the ultimate rebuttal to Voldemort's worldview. It is a rejection of the myth that power defines worth. In refusing to be the Elder Wand's master, Harry ends the cycle of bloodshed. He proves that the greatest power lies in choice, not in force.